Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. My third week as a deputy in Bridger County, Sheriff Dane Colfax called me into his office. He had an old planning map spread across his desk, red marker in hand, tracing boundaries I didn't recognize. "Riley," he said without looking up. "You settling in okay?" "Yes, sir. Learning the routes." "Good. There's something you need to know about Sector 12. He tapped a section on the map. A blank space between two county roads, maybe 40 acres. No structures marked, no address numbers, just empty. I leaned closer. "What's there?" "Nothing you need to worry about." He drew a thick red circle around it. "You see this area during patrol. You drive past. Don't stop. Don't investigate. Don't even slow down if you can help it." It was the way he said it. Not like a suggestion, but like a rule that had been broken before. "Is it private property?" I asked. "Technically, no. It's county land, but it's been restricted since before I took office." He folded the map and handed it to me. "Keep this in your patrol vehicle. Study it tonight. I don't want any confusion about where that boundary is." I took the map, feeling the weight of something unspoken. "Sheriff, if there's a safety issue, there's no issue as long as you follow the rule." He met my eyes then, and I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not irritation, just a deep, tired certainty. "Riley, I've been sheriff here for 18 years. This is the one thing I'm asking you to trust me on without questions. Can you do that?" I nodded. "Yes, sir." "Good. Now get out there, and Riley?" He paused as I reached the door. "If you ever see anything unusual near that area, lights, movement, vehicles, you radio me directly, not dispatch, me." I left his office with more questions than I'd arrived with, but I knew better than to push. Colfax was fair, straightforward, and he'd never steered me wrong. If he said, "Stay away," there had to be a reason. That night, I spread the map across my kitchen table and studied it under the lamp. Sector 12 sat in a remote stretch between Highway 47 and Old Timber Road. The nearest residence was 3 miles east. According to the map, the area had once been marked as County Maintenance Access, but someone had crossed it out in faded ink and written restricted in its place. I traced my finger along the boundary. The northern edge ran along a creek bed. The southern edge followed an old fence line. There were no gates marked, no access roads, just those 2 county roads on either side, an empty space between them. The next morning, I started my shift at 6. The fall air was cold and damp, mist hanging low over the fields. I drove my usual patrol route, checking the high school parking lot, cruising through downtown, making a swing past the truck stop on the interstate. Around 9, I found myself on Highway 47, heading north. I wasn't planning to go near Sector 12, I was just following my route. But as I came around a bend in the road, I saw it for the first time. A chain-link fence maybe 10 feet tall, running parallel to the highway. It was old, the metal weathered and dark, but it was solid. Every 20 yards there was a yellow sign, "No trespassing, county property. Violators will be prosecuted." I slowed down without meaning to. Through the fence, I could see trees, thick pine and oak, crowding close to the barrier. The ground was overgrown with brush and wild grass. It looked like no one had set foot in there for years. But there was something else. something that made me ease off the gas even more. Camera housings. Small, dark boxes mounted on poles every 30 yards along the fence. They were pointed inward toward the trees. I'd seen security cameras on government buildings, on convenience stores, on private lots, but I'd never seen them on empty county land in the middle of nowhere. My radio crackled. Unit 7, what's your location? I grabbed the handset. Highway 47, northbound near mile marker 14. There was a pause. Then Colfax's voice came through, calm but firm. Copy that. Unit 7, proceed to the truck stop. We've got a report of a theft. On my way. I didn't mention the fence. I didn't mention the cameras. I just put my foot on the gas and drove past, watching the fence disappear in my rearview mirror. But I thought about it all day. That evening, back at the station, I found Kit Landry in the break room. Kit was a county ranger, mid-40s, with the kind of weathered face that came from spending more time outdoors than in. We'd worked a few calls together, livestock loose on the highway, illegal dumping near the state forest. He was quiet, competent, and he knew the county better than anyone. Kit, I said, pouring myself a coffee, you ever patrol near Sector 12? He looked up from his sandwich, and for just a second his expression went flat. No, just wondering. I saw that fence today. Looked pretty secure for county land. Kit set down his sandwich and wiped his hands on a napkin, taking his time. Riley, how long you been working here? 3 weeks. 3 weeks. He nodded slowly. Let me give you some advice. There are places in this county where the rules are different. Not because anyone wants them to be, just because that's how it is. Sector 12 is one of those places. What's out there? Nothing. He said it too quickly, and that's the point. It's nothing. So there's no reason to go looking. But the cameras are there to make sure it stays nothing. Kit stood up, gathering his trash. Sheriff gave you the talk, right? The rule? Yeah? Then follow it. Trust me, Riley. Some things are restricted for a reason, and the reason doesn't always make sense until it's too late. He left, and I sat there with my coffee, staring at the wall. Over the next 2 weeks, I drove past Sector 12 maybe a dozen times. I never stopped. I never slowed down more than I had to. But I always looked. The fence was always there, solid and unbroken. The cameras never moved. The trees never changed. It was like looking at a photograph, static, frozen, dead. But one morning, everything shifted. It was early October, just after dawn. I was heading north on Highway 47, the road empty except for me. The mist was heavy that day, rolling across the fields in thick gray sheets. Visibility was maybe 50 yards. As I came around the bend near Sector 12, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. A car, pulled off onto the shoulder, right next to the fence. I slowed down, my stomach tightening. It was an old sedan, maybe 15 years old, covered in road dust. The driver's door was open. I pulled in behind it and hit my lights. Dispatch, Unit 7. I've got a vehicle stopped on Highway 47 near mile marker 14, running the plate now. I called in the number and waited, scanning the area. The mist was thick around the car, and I couldn't see anyone inside or nearby. Unit 7, that vehicle is registered to a Patricia Hollis, age 62, address in Millerton. No wants or warrants. Copy. I'm going to make contact. I stepped out of my cruiser, one hand resting on my radio. Sheriff's Department. Is anyone here? No answer. Just the sound of wind moving through the trees behind the fence. I approached the car slowly. The driver's seat was empty. Keys were still in the ignition. A purse sat on the passenger seat. Wallet inside, $53 in cash. No signs of struggle. No blood. No damage. But on the dashboard, someone had written something in the condensation on the inside of the windshield. 2 words traced with a finger. Don't look. The letters were already fading, moisture beading and running down the glass. But they'd been written recently, within the last few minutes. I stepped back from the car and keyed my radio. "Dispatch, I need the sheriff at my location. And tell him it's about Sector 12. Copy, Unit 7. Sheriff is en route." I stood there, next to that empty car, and for the first time since I'd started this job, I felt something I hadn't felt before. Not fear, exactly, but something close to it, a feeling like I was being watched, not by cameras, by something else. I turned and looked at the fence. Through the chain link and the mist, I could see the trees. Dark, still, silent. And somewhere in that silence I heard it. A sound, faint, distant, like someone dragging metal across concrete. It stopped, started again. Stopped. I took a step toward the fence, my hand moving to my flashlight. "Riley." I spun around. Sheriff Colfax was standing next to his cruiser 10 feet away. I hadn't even heard him pull up. "Step away from the fence," he said quietly. I did. He walked past me to the abandoned car, looked inside, saw the message on the windshield. His jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. He just pulled out his phone and made a call. "Kit, it's Colfax. I need you at mile marker 14 on 47, now." He hung up and turned to me. "Did you touch anything?" "Just the door handle. Checked for ID. See anyone?" "No, sir. See neither. Hear anything?" I hesitated. There was a sound. From inside the fence, like metal scraping. Colfax looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Get in your cruiser. Wait there." "Sheriff, that's not a request, deputy." I went back to my vehicle and sat behind the wheel, watching as Colfax stood next to the fence, staring into the trees. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, hands in his pockets, like he was waiting for something. 10 minutes later, Kit Landry arrived. The two of them talked in low voices I couldn't hear. Then Kit went to his truck and came back with a heavy-duty bolt cutter. They walked along the fence, checking the posts, the links, the ground, looking for something. After another 15 minutes, Colfax came back to my cruiser. "We're going to have the vehicle towed. I want you to file a report. Abandoned vehicle. Possible welfare check needed on Patricia Hollis. Standard procedure. Don't mention the fence. Don't mention the message on the windshield. But Sheriff, Riley." He leaned down, his voice low and steady. "I know you have questions, and I'm not asking you to stop thinking. I'm asking you to trust that there are some things in this job that don't have easy answers. Some things we handle quietly because that's the only way to handle them. What about the woman? Patricia Hollis. We'll find her. Will we?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me with those tired eyes, and I knew. We wouldn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that car, that message, that sound behind the fence. I pulled out the map Colfax had given me and studied it again, looking for something I'd missed. And that's when I saw it. In the bottom corner of the map, barely visible, was a date written in pencil. 1987, the year the area was marked as restricted. I grabbed my laptop and started searching. County records, old newspaper archives, anything about Sector 12. I found one article, a single paragraph in the Bridger County Register from October 1987. County commissioners voted 4-1 to close County Maintenance Road 12 to public access following an incident involving a maintenance worker. No further details were provided. The area will be monitored by county security. That was it. No names, no details. Just an incident. I kept digging, found nothing else. It was like someone had scrubbed the records clean. But I did find something else. Something that made my skin crawl. A list of missing persons in Bridger County over the past 30 years. 11 names. 11 people who'd disappeared without a trace. And when I cross-referenced their last known locations with the map, a pattern emerged. Every single one of them had last been seen within 8 miles of Sector 12. The next week passed in a strange kind of quiet. Patricia Hollis never turned up. Her car was towed, processed, and stored in the county impound lot. A welfare check at her home in Millerton found her house locked, her mail piling up. Her cat unfed. She'd left no note, no message, no indication of where she'd gone or why. She'd just vanished. The case was handed over to the state police, and we were told to move on. Just another missing person in a county that had too many of them. But I couldn't move on, because every time I drove past Sector 12, I felt it, that feeling of being watched. I mentioned it to Kit one afternoon when we were both getting gas at the truck stop. He was filling up his Ranger truck and I pulled in next to him. "Kit, can I ask you something?" He didn't look at me. "Depends. How many people have gone missing near Sector 12? His hand tightened on the gas pump. "I don't know what you're talking about." I looked it up. 11 people in 30 years. That's not normal. Riley. He turned to face me then, and his expression was harder than I'd ever seen it. "You need to let this go." "I can't. There's something wrong out there. Something the department isn't talking about." There are a lot of things the department doesn't talk about. That's how it works. He finished filling his tank and hung up the pump. "You want some advice? Stop looking. Stop asking questions. Do your job, go home, and forget about that place." "What if I can't?" Kit stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then you're going to end up like the others." My blood went cold. What others? The ones who couldn't let it go. He walked back to his truck, then paused. "There's a reason Colfax has been sheriff for 18 years, Riley. It's because he knows when to look away. You'd do well to learn that lesson before it's too late." He drove off, leaving me standing there with more questions than before. That night, I made a decision I knew I'd regret. I was going to Sector 12, after dark, alone. I told myself it was just reconnaissance. I'd park on Old Timber Road, the southern boundary, and take a look at the fence from the other side. Maybe get a better sense of what was behind all those cameras. I wouldn't cross the fence. I wouldn't break any rules. I'd just look. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I waited until midnight, then changed into civilian clothes. Jeans, a dark jacket, boots. I left my service weapon at home and took my personal truck instead of the cruiser. If anyone saw me, I wanted it to look like I was just a civilian out for a drive. Old Timber Road was a narrow dirt track that ran along the southern edge of Sector 12. It was rarely used, mostly by hunters during deer season. At night, it was completely deserted. I parked about a quarter mile from the fence and walked the rest of the way, using my flashlight sparingly. The woods on either side of the road were thick and dark, the kind of dark that feels heavy, like something pressing against you. After about 10 minutes, I reached the fence. It was the same as the one on Highway 47, 10 feet tall, chain link, topped with barbed wire. But this side was different. The trees grew right up against it, branches pressing through the gaps in the metal, and there were no cameras here. At least, none that I could see. I stood there, shining my flashlight through the fence, trying to see what was on the other side. Trees, thick underbrush, darkness. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place, but then I heard it again. That sound, metal scraping against concrete. It was faint, distant, somewhere deep in the woods beyond the fence. It would scrape for a few seconds, then stop, then start again. Scrape, stop, rhythmic, deliberate. I felt my pulse quicken. Part of me wanted to turn around and walk back to my truck, but another part, the part that had made me a deputy in the first place, needed to know what was making that sound. I followed the fence line, walking parallel to it, my flashlight beam cutting through the trees. The sound grew louder as I moved east, and after about 50 yards, I saw something that made me stop. A gap in the fence. Not a hole or a cut. A gate. Small, maybe 4 feet wide, secured with a heavy chain and padlock. But it was recent. The metal was clean, not weathered like the rest of the fence. Someone had put this gate here, and someone was using it. I crouched down and examined the ground near the gate. Fresh tire tracks in the dirt. A vehicle had been here within the last few days. My radio crackled. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I'd left my personal radio in the truck, but the sound was so similar, so unexpected, that for a second I thought, but no, it wasn't my radio. It was coming from the other side of the fence. I stood up slowly, aiming my flashlight toward the sound. About 20 yards inside the fence, I saw it. A radio, one of our department radios, sitting on top of a tree stump. It crackled again, and then I heard a voice. My voice. "Unit 7, what's your location?" It was the transmission from 2 weeks ago, the morning I'd first driven past Sector 12. My stomach dropped. The radio crackled again, and this time I heard Colfax. "Copy that. Unit 7, proceed to the truck stop." Then static, then silence. I stood there, staring at that radio, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. How did our radio get in there? Who was playing back old transmissions? And then I realized something even worse. If that radio was there, someone had been listening. Someone had heard every transmission I'd made near Sector 12, every conversation, every location. Someone knew I was here. I backed away from the fence, my heart pounding. The scraping sound had stopped. The woods were silent now. Too silent. I turned and started walking back toward my truck, moving faster than before. The trees seemed closer, the darkness thicker. I kept my flashlight pointed ahead, trying not to think about what might be behind me. And then I heard footsteps. Not on my side of the fence. On the other side. Someone was walking parallel to me, matching my pace, staying just out of sight in the trees. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I walked. The footsteps walked. "Who's there?" I called out. No answer. Just the sound of wind through the branches. I started running. The footsteps ran too, crashing through the underbrush faster than I was, gaining on me. I reached my truck, fumbled with the keys, got the door open. I threw myself inside, slammed the door, locked it. Started the engine. As I pulled away, my headlights swept across the fence one last time. And standing there, gripping the chain link with both hands, was a figure. I only saw it for a second, just a silhouette, but I could see enough to know it was watching me. And then I was gone, speeding down Old Timber Road, my hands shaking on the wheel. I didn't stop until I was back in town, parked outside my apartment. I sat there in my truck for 20 minutes, trying to steady my breathing, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. But I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. Someone, or something, was inside Sector 12, and they knew I'd been there. The next morning, I showed up for my shift exhausted and on edge. I'd barely slept, and when I did, I dreamed of that figure at the fence, those hands gripping the metal. Colfax called me into his office before I even made it to the patrol room. "Riley, sit down." I sat. He closed the door behind me. "I'm going to ask you a question," he said, "and I want you to answer honestly. Did you go to Sector 12 last night?" My throat went dry. "How did you— the cameras, they're motion activated. And last night, around 12:30, one of them picked up a figure near the southern fence line. He turned his computer monitor toward me. This look familiar? On the screen was a grainy black and white image. It showed a person, me, standing at the fence, flashlight in hand. "Sheriff, I can explain." "I don't want an explanation." He closed the image and looked at me. "I want to know if you saw anything." I hesitated. I heard something, a scraping sound, and there was a radio, one of ours. Someone was playing back old transmissions. Colfax's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. What else? Someone was following me, on the other side of the fence, and when I left, I paused. I saw someone standing there, watching. He nodded slowly, like I'd just confirmed something he already knew. "Riley, I'm going to be direct with you. What you did last night was stupid and dangerous, but it's done, so now I need to know. Are you going to let this go, or are you going to keep pushing?" "Sheriff, there's something out there. Something we should be investigating." "No." He cut me off. "There's something out there we should be avoiding. There's a difference." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot. "Riley, I've been in law enforcement for 32 years. I've seen things that would make your skin crawl, but the one thing I've learned is this. Some cases don't have solutions. Some questions don't have answers. And some places are better left alone. But what about Patricia Hollis? What about the other missing people? They made the same mistake you almost made last night. They got curious. They went looking for answers." He turned back to me, and they found something they shouldn't have. "What did they find?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me with those tired eyes and said, "Go home, Riley. Take the day off. Think about whether this job is right for you. Because if you can't follow orders, if you can't trust me when I tell you to stay away from something, then you don't belong in this department." I left his office feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I wasn't being fired, but I'd been given an ultimatum. Drop it or leave. I went home. I tried to sleep. I tried to watch TV to distract myself. But all I could think about was that figure at the fence, and the radio, and the footsteps. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Hello?" Static. Just static. Like a radio that wasn't quite tuned in. "Hello?" I said again. And then, through the static, I heard it. My own voice. "Unit 7, what's your location?" The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my hands shaking. Someone was calling me, someone who had access to our radio transmissions, someone who wanted me to know they were listening. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going back to Sector 12, but I wasn't dropping this either. I was going to find out what happened in 1987. I was going to find out why that area was restricted. And I was going to find out who, or what, was behind that fence. Even if it cost me my badge, I spent the next 3 days digging. Not at work, I couldn't risk Colfax finding out, but at home, late at night, using every resource I could access without raising flags. I started with the county archives. Most of the records from the 80s had been digitized, but there were gaps. Convenient gaps. Months where reports were missing or marked as lost or damaged. And 1987 had more gaps than any other year. But I found something. A budget report from November 1987 that mentioned an emergency expenditure of $47,000 for security infrastructure installation, County Road 12 area. $47,000 in 1987 was serious money. That wasn't a few cameras and a fence. That was a fortified perimeter. I kept digging. Found a personnel report from December 1987 listing 3 county maintenance workers who'd been placed on indefinite administrative leave. No names, no reasons. Just gone. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. A death certificate. Eugene Marsh, age 34, county maintenance worker. Date of death, October 19th, 1987. Cause of death, accidental drowning. But there was no water near Sector 12. No lakes, no rivers, just that small creek on the northern boundary, and it was barely 3 feet deep. I looked up Marsh's widow, Carolyn Marsh, still living in Bridger County, still listed in the phone book. I called her the next morning. Mrs. Marsh, my name is Riley Harker. I'm a deputy with the Bridger County Sheriff's Department. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions about your late husband. There was a long silence, then, "Is this about the accident?" "Yes, ma'am." Another pause. "I haven't talked about this in a long time. Not since it happened. I understand. But anything you could tell me would be helpful." She sighed. "Can you come to my house? I don't want to talk about this over the phone." An hour later, I was sitting in Carolyn Marsh's living room. She was in her early 70s now, gray-haired and frail, but her eyes were sharp. "Eugene died 38 years ago," she said. "But I remember that day like it was yesterday. Can you tell me what happened?" She looked down at her hands. "He was working on County Road 12, maintenance work. He'd been out there for a week, clearing brush, fixing drainage, routine stuff." Her voice wavered. "On October 19th, he didn't come home. The sheriff at the time, Harold Griggs, he came to my door around midnight and said there'd been an accident, said Eugene drowned in the creek. Did you believe him?" She looked up at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. "No. Eugene grew up on a lake. He was a strong swimmer, and that creek was nothing. A child could wade across it. Did you see his body? They wouldn't let me. Said it was too traumatic. Closed casket funeral." She wiped her eyes. "But I saw the report, the official one. It said he slipped on wet rocks, hit his head, fell into the water. Unconscious, drowned. But you don't think that's what happened?" "I know it's not what happened, because Eugene called me that afternoon, around 3 o'clock. He was scared, Riley. I'd never heard him scared before. He said he'd found something that wasn't supposed to be there. He said he was going to report it and come straight home." My pulse quickened. "Did he say what he found?" "No. The call cut off before he could tell me, and that was the last time I heard his voice." She stood up and walked to a bookshelf, pulling down an old shoebox. "After the funeral, I went through his things. Found this." She handed me the box. Inside was a small notebook, the kind maintenance workers use to log their hours and tasks. I opened it and flipped to the last entry, October 19th, 1987. The handwriting was shaky, rushed. "Something wrong with the drainage tunnel. Water flow stopped. Went inside to check blockage. Found door. Shouldn't be here. Metal door, no rust, new, locked. Heard sound from other side, not water, not animal. Called Griggs. Told me to leave immediately, don't go back. Too late. Saw me." The entry ended there. "Who saw him?" I asked. "I don't know. But after Eugene died, Sheriff Griggs came back to my house. He brought me a check, $50,000. Said it was workers' compensation, but it was hush money. He told me if I kept quiet about Eugene's call, about what he said he found, the county would take care of me. If I didn't," she trailed off. "What did he say would happen?" "He didn't say anything. He just looked at me. And I understood. So I took the money. I kept quiet, and I've regretted it every day since." I looked down at the notebook. "Can I keep this?" "Take it. I don't want it in my house anymore." Maybe you can do what I couldn't. Maybe you can find out what really happened out there." I thanked her and left, the notebook burning in my jacket pocket. That night, I called Kit. I needed someone I could trust, someone who'd been around long enough to know the history. "Kit, it's Riley. I need to talk to you. In person." "Riley, I told you. I know what you told me. But I found something. Something about 1987. About Eugene Marsh." There was a long silence, then, "Where are you?" "Home." "Stay there. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He showed up in his personal truck, not his Ranger vehicle. He looked tired, worried. I showed him the notebook. He read the last entry, his face going pale. "Where did you get this?" "His widow, Carolyn Marsh." "Jesus Christ, Riley." He set the notebook down and rubbed his face. "You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what this means. Then tell me." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but not here. Get in the truck." We drove out of town, heading east on back roads I'd never been on. Kit didn't speak the whole way, just kept his eyes on the road, his jaw set. After 30 minutes, he pulled off onto a dirt road that led to an abandoned farmhouse. He parked behind it, out of sight from the main road. "We can talk here," he said. We got out and stood next to the truck, the cold October wind cutting through my jacket. "What do you know about the Cold War?" Kit asked. I blinked. "What?" "The Cold War. Specifically, the late 70s, early 80s, when everyone was terrified of nuclear war. I know the basics. Why? Because that's when the government started building bunkers, underground shelters, continuity of government facilities, places where officials could hide if the bombs started falling." He lit a cigarette, his hands shaking slightly. "Most people know about the big ones. Mount Weather in Virginia, Raven Rock in Pennsylvania, but there were dozens of smaller sites, secret sites, built in rural areas, away from population centers." I felt my stomach sink. "Sector 12. He nodded. "In 1982, the federal government bought 40 acres of land in Bridger County through a shell corporation. Built an underground bunker, small one. Maybe enough space for 50 people. Access tunnel, generators, water filtration, the works. The county was paid to keep quiet about it. And for a few years, that worked fine. The bunker was sealed. Nobody went near it. But then Eugene Marsh found it. Yeah, he found the access tunnel. It runs from an old drainage culvert on the creek bed. The government had disguised it as county infrastructure, but Marsh was thorough. He went inside to check a blockage, and he found the door. The real door." Kit took a drag from his cigarette. He called Sheriff Griggs, and Griggs called someone else, someone federal. And within an hour, Marsh was dead. They killed him. I don't know, maybe. Or maybe he really did drown, but either way, the message was clear: stay away. Kit flicked ash onto the ground. After that, the feds locked it down, built the fence, installed the cameras, made it clear that Sector 12 was off limits, and the county sheriff, whoever held the position, was given one job: keep people away, no questions, no investigations. But what about the missing people? Patricia Hollis, the others? Kit looked at me, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. That's the part that doesn't make sense, because the bunker should be empty. It was decommissioned in 1982 after the Cold War ended. Sealed up, abandoned. But the cameras are still active, the fence is still maintained, and people who get too close, he trailed off. Disappear. Yeah. So, what's in there now? I don't know, and neither does Colfax, but he's smart enough not to ask. Kit dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his boot. "Riley, you need to drop this. Right now. Because if the feds think you're digging into Sector 12, you'll end up like Marsh. Or worse. What could be worse? He didn't answer, he just looked at me, and I understood. The missing people, they hadn't just disappeared, they'd been taken. And whatever was behind that fence, it was still there. I went home that night and stared at Eugene Marsh's notebook for hours. I read the last entry over and over, trying to make sense of it. Saw me. Who saw him? A federal agent? A security guard? Or something else? I thought about Patricia Hollis, about the message on her windshield. Don't look. She'd seen something, and it had seen her. My phone rang. Unknown number again. I answered. Hello? Static, then my voice, distorted and broken. Unit 7, what's your location? Who is this? More static, then another voice. Unfamiliar, low, rasping. Stay away. The line went dead. I set the phone down, my hands shaking. Someone was warning me or threatening me. I couldn't tell which. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't staying away. The next night I did something I knew I'd regret. I went back to Sector 12. But this time I wasn't alone. I called Kit and told him my plan. He said I was insane. He said I'd get myself killed. But in the end he agreed to come with me. One time, he said. We go in, we look around, we get out, and then we never talk about this again. We met at midnight on Old Timber Road. Both of us in civilian clothes, both of us armed. Kit brought bolt cutters and a crowbar. I brought flashlights and a camera. We go through the southern gate, Kit said. The cameras don't cover that area as well, and if we're quick, we can get in and out before anyone notices. We walked to the gate in silence, the woods dark and still around us. When we reached it, Kit cut the chain with the bolt cutters. The metal snapped with a loud crack that echoed through the trees. We both froze, listening. Nothing. Kit pulled the gate open and we stepped through. The air felt different on the other side. Colder, heavier, like walking into a freezer. We moved quickly, staying low, using our flashlights sparingly. The trees were thick, the underbrush tangled. It felt like no one had been in here in years. After 10 minutes, we found it. The creek bed, exactly where Kit said it would be. And in the side of the creek bed, half hidden by overgrown vines and debris, was a concrete culvert. Maybe 4 feet in diameter, old, weathered. Kit pulled the vines away, revealing a heavy metal grate covering the opening. It was locked, but the lock was rusted. One good hit with the crowbar, and it broke free. We pulled the grate aside and shone our lights into the tunnel. It sloped downward, disappearing into darkness. "This is it," Kit whispered. "The access tunnel." We climbed inside, crouching to fit. The walls were slick with moisture, the air stale. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing rusted pipes and crumbling concrete. After about 50 yards, the tunnel opened into a larger space. A maintenance room. Old equipment lined the walls. Generators, water pumps, electrical panels. Everything covered in dust and rust. And at the far end of the room, just like Eugene Marsh had written, was a door. A metal door, no rust, clean, new. Kit approached it slowly, his hand on his sidearm. "This shouldn't be here. This should be sealed, decommissioned." He tried the handle. Locked. But next to the door was a keypad. Digital, powered. "Someone's been here," I said. "Recently." Kit didn't respond. He just stared at the keypad, his face pale. And then we heard it. From the other side of the door. That sound, the scraping, metal on concrete. We both stepped back, our hands moving to our weapons. The sound stopped, then, slowly, the keypad beeped. Someone was entering a code from the inside. "We need to leave," Kit whispered. "Now." But before we could move, the door opened, not all the way, just a crack, maybe 6 inches. Darkness beyond, no light, no movement, just darkness. And from that darkness we heard breathing, slow, labored, wrong. Kit grabbed my arm and pulled me back toward the tunnel. We didn't run, we didn't speak. We just moved fast and quiet back the way we'd come. Behind us, the door opened wider. We didn't look back. We climbed out of the culvert, through the gate, and we ran. Ran until we reached our vehicles. Ran until we were off Old Timber Road and back on the highway. Kit pulled over at a gas station and we both sat there, breathing hard, trying to process what we'd just seen. "What the hell was that?" I said. "I don't know." Kit's hands were shaking on the steering wheel. "But we're not going back, ever. We have to report this. To who? The sheriff? The feds? You think they don't already know?" He looked at me. "Riley, whatever's down there, it's not our problem. It's above our pay grade, way above. But the missing people are gone, and there's nothing we can do about it." He started his truck. "Go home. Forget about tonight. And for God's sake, stay away from Sector 12. He drove off, leaving me alone in the parking lot. I went home. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't stop thinking about that door, about the darkness beyond it, about the breathing. The next morning, I showed up for my shift. Colfax was waiting for me in his office. "Riley, sit down." I sat. He turned his computer monitor toward me. On the screen was a black and white image from last night. 2 figures near the southern fence, me and Kit. "I'm going to say this once," Colfax said. "You're done. No more questions. No more investigating. You follow orders, or you turn in your badge. Those are your options. Sheriff, I'm not finished." He closed the image. "Last night, you crossed a line, and I can't protect you anymore. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to forget about Sector 12. You're going to go back to being a good deputy. And you're going to trust that some things are better left alone. What if I can't?" He looked at me for a long moment. "Then you'll end up like Eugene Marsh. And I'll have to knock on your mother's door and tell her you had an accident." I left his office and went to my cruiser. I sat there for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. I had a choice: follow orders and stay safe, or keep pushing and risk everything. I thought about Patricia Hollis, about the 11 missing people, about Eugene Marsh's notebook, and I thought about that door, that darkness, that breathing. I made my choice. That night, I went back to Sector 12. Alone. I didn't tell Kit. I didn't tell anyone. I just went. I parked on Old Timber Road and walked to the southern gate. The chain had been replaced, but I cut it again. I went through. I found the culvert. I climbed inside. I made my way down the tunnel to the maintenance room. The door was still there. Still closed. But this time, there was something different. A message, written on the door in chalk. 3 words: "You were warned." I stood there, staring at those words, my flashlight beam shaking in my hand. And then I heard it. Behind me, in the tunnel. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Coming closer, I turned, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, and I saw it. A figure standing at the entrance to the maintenance room. Tall, thin, wrong. It didn't move, it just stood there, watching me. I raised my weapon. "Stop! Sheriff's Department!" It took a step forward. I fired. The shot echoed through the tunnel, deafening. But the figure didn't fall, didn't flinch. It just kept walking. I fired again, and again. Nothing. I turned and ran toward the door, the metal door, the only other way out. I slammed into it, grabbed the handle, pulled, locked. The footsteps behind me grew louder. I pounded on the door. "Let me in, please." The keypad beeped, the door opened, and I fell through, into darkness. The door slammed shut behind me. And for a moment there was silence. Then I heard breathing. Not behind me, not in front of me, all around me. I turned on my flashlight, and I saw them, dozens of figures, standing in the darkness, motionless, watching, and in the center of the room, sitting on the floor, was Patricia Hollis. She looked up at me, her eyes empty. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered, and then my flashlight died. I don't know how long I was down there, hours, days, it felt like forever. But when I woke up, I was in my truck, parked on Old Timber Road. The sun was rising. I checked my watch, 6 o'clock a.m. I'd been gone for 6 hours. But I had no memory of leaving the bunker. No memory of how I got back to my truck. I just woke up. I drove home, showered, changed. And when I showed up for my shift, Colfax called me into his office. "You look like hell," he said. I didn't sleep well. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Take the day off, rest up, you've got patrol tomorrow." I left his office and walked to my cruiser. And as I sat down, I noticed something on my dashboard, a note, handwritten. "Welcome to Sector 12. I stared at that note for a long time, and then I understood I was one of them now, one of the missing. I still show up for my shifts, I still patrol the county, I still answer calls, but something's different. Something's wrong. Sometimes, late at night, I hear static on my radio, and through the static I hear voices. My voice, Patricia Hollis's voice, Eugene Marsh's voice. All of us repeating the same message, stay away. I'd been working patrol for the Sheriff's Department in Hackett County for about 8 months when I first heard about Water Tank 19. It came up during a briefing on a Tuesday morning, casual as anything, like it was just another location on the map. Sheriff's Deputy Noah Lemick, that's me, sitting in the briefing room with 5 other deputies, drinking bad coffee and listening to Sergeant Whalen go through the weekly updates. "Route assignments," he said, clicking through a slide on the projector. "Noah, you're taking Sector 4 this week. North District, County Roads 200 through 215, and the industrial zone out past Mercer Creek." I nodded, making notes. "One thing," Whalen added, not looking up from his clipboard. "Water Tank 19 is in your sector. It's the old water treatment facility off Route 211. It's been decommissioned since 2003. "Got it," I said. "You don't patrol it after dark." I looked up. "What?" "After dark, you stay clear of that facility. No welfare checks, no trespassing calls, nothing. If someone reports activity there at night, you log it and move on. Don't investigate." The room went quiet. The other deputies didn't seem surprised. They just kept drinking their coffee, looking at their phones. "Why not?" I asked. Whalen finally looked at me. "Because those are the standing orders. Have been for 20 years. But if someone's trespassing, then they're trespassing on county property, and we'll deal with it in the morning. At night, you leave it alone." He moved on to the next slide before I could ask anything else. After the briefing, I caught up with one of the senior deputies in the parking lot. Guy named Marcus. Been on the force for 15 years. "Marcus, what's the deal with Water Tank 19? He unlocked his cruiser and tossed his bag in the back seat. "No deal, just follow the orders." "Come on, there's gotta be a reason we don't patrol it at night." Marcus sighed and looked around, making sure no one else was listening. "Look, Noah, I don't know the whole story, but I know guys who've ignored those orders, and I know they don't work here anymore." "They got fired?" "Some of them, others just quit. Said they didn't want to work night shifts anymore. He climbed into his cruiser. Take my advice. Don't ask questions about that place. Just stay away after dark. He drove off, leaving me standing there with more questions than I'd started with. That afternoon, I decided to take a drive out to Water Tank 19 during daylight, just to see what all the fuss was about. Route 211 was a 2-lane county road that ran through farmland and patches of pine forest. After about 6 miles, I saw the turnoff, a gravel access road with a rusted gate hanging open on broken hinges. A faded sign read, Hackett County Water Authority, Facility 19, Authorized Personnel Only. I turned onto the access road and drove slowly, taking it all in. The facility sat in a clearing surrounded by trees. It was bigger than I'd expected, a sprawling complex of concrete buildings, metal tanks, and rusted machinery. Everything was covered in years of neglect. Weeds growing through cracked pavement, windows broken or boarded up, chain-link fencing sagging and torn. But the strangest thing was how intact it all looked. Like someone had just walked away one day and never came back. I parked near the main building and got out. The place was silent except for the wind moving through the trees and the distant call of crows. The main structure was a 2-story concrete block building with a flat roof. The windows on the ground floor were covered with steel grates. The door was padlocked, and next to it was a newer-looking sign, No Trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. I walked around the perimeter. Behind the main building were the tanks, massive cylindrical structures, maybe 30 feet tall, connected by a maze of pipes and catwalks. Most of them had numbers stenciled on the side in faded paint, 15, 16, 17, 18, and at the far end of the complex, separated from the others by about 50 yards, was Tank 19. It was identical to the others in size and shape, but something about it felt different. Wrong. The ground around it was clear. No weeds, no grass, just bare dirt. And the metal surface was covered in something dark. Rust, maybe. Or something else. I walked closer, my hand resting on my sidearm without really thinking about it. The tank had a maintenance ladder running up one side to a hatch at the top. At the base was a heavy steel door with a wheel lock, like something you'd see on a submarine. And bolted across the door were 3 separate padlocks. New ones, heavy duty. I crouched down and examined the ground near the door, and that's when I saw them. Footprints. In the dirt. Fresh. Not boot prints like you'd expect from maintenance workers or deputies. These were bare feet, multiple sets, different sizes, leading from the tree line to the tank door, and then back again. I stood up, my pulse quickening, and looked toward the trees. The forest was dark and thick, even in daylight, and for just a moment I thought I saw movement, a shadow shifting between the trunks. I unclipped my radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I'm at Water Tank 19, doing a daylight inspection. Everything looks secure, but I've got fresh footprints near Tank 19 itself. Possible trespassers." Sierra Holcomb's voice came back, calm and professional. She'd been dispatched for Hackett County for 12 years, and her voice was one of the most reassuring sounds in the world when you were out on patrol alone. "Copy, Unit 12. Do you need backup?" "Negative. It's daytime. Just wanted it logged." "Roger that. And Noah, be careful out there." "Always am." I took a few photos of the footprints with my phone, then walked back to my cruiser. As I drove away, I kept glancing in my rearview mirror at Tank 19, standing there in the clearing like a monument to something I didn't understand. That night, I called Sierra after my shift. We'd developed a kind of friendship over the months, the kind that happens when you spend hours talking over the radio in the middle of the night when nothing's happening, and you're both just trying to stay awake. "Hey, Noah, what's up? You got a minute? I wanted to ask you about water tank 19. There was a pause. What about it? Why don't we patrol it after dark? Another pause, longer this time. You went out there today, didn't you? Yeah, during daylight. And I found footprints. Bare feet, fresh. Someone's been out there recently. Sierra sighed. Noah, I'm going to tell you the same thing I tell every new deputy who asks about that place. Follow the standing orders. Don't patrol it at night. Don't investigate calls there after dark. Just leave it alone. But why? Because I've been working dispatch for 12 years, and in that time I've sent 3 deputies out to water tank 19 at night. None of them filed a report. 2 of them quit within a week. The third one transferred to a different county and won't return my calls. What happened to them? I don't know. They won't talk about it. But I know they saw something. Something that scared them enough to walk away from a career. Her voice softened. Noah, I like you. You're a good deputy. So do me a favor and just trust me on this one. Stay away from that place after dark. I wanted to argue. I wanted to demand answers. But something in her voice stopped me. Okay, I said. I'll stay away. Good. Now go get some sleep. You're on night shift tomorrow. I hung up and sat there in my apartment, staring at the photos on my phone. Those footprints. Those bare, human footprints leading to a locked tank in the middle of nowhere. What were they doing out there? The next week passed uneventfully. I patrolled my sector during the day and early evening. Avoided water tank 19 after dark like I'd been told, and tried not to think about those footprints. But then, on Friday night, everything changed. I was on night patrol, cruising down Route 211 around 11 o'clock p.m., when my radio crackled. Unit 12, this is dispatch. Go ahead, Sierra. I've got a call from a truck driver on Route 211. He says he saw lights at the old water facility. Multiple lights, moving around inside the fence. My stomach tightened. Copy. What's my instruction? There was a pause. I could hear Sierra typing on her keyboard. Standing orders say to log it and move on. But Noah... The caller sounded really concerned. He said it looked like a lot of people in there. I pulled over to the side of the road, thinking, how many people? He said at least a dozen, maybe more. A dozen people at water tank 19 in the middle of the night. That wasn't just trespassing, that was something organized. Sierra, I'm going to do a drive-by, just to assess the situation. I won't engage. Noah, I won't engage. I'll just look. If it's serious, I'll call for backup. Another pause, then, be careful and stay on the radio. Will do. I pulled back onto Route 211 and headed toward the facility. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the trees on either side of the road. The night was clear and cold, the kind of cold that makes your breath fog. As I approached the access road, I killed my headlights and pulled over. I sat there for a moment, listening. The radio was quiet except for the occasional crackle of static. I grabbed out my flashlight and got out of the cruiser, moving quietly toward the entrance of the facility. The gate was still hanging open, just like it had been during the day, and the truck driver had been right. There were lights inside the fence. Not flashlights, something else. A soft, flickering glow, like candlelight or lanterns. And I could see movement, shadows shifting against the walls of the buildings. I crept closer, staying low, keeping to the trees along the access road. My heart was pounding, but I kept my breathing steady. I'd been trained for this. Observe, assess, report. Don't engage without backup. I got within about 50 yards of the main building and crouched behind an old equipment shed. From there, I had a clear view of the complex. There were people inside the fence. At least 15 of them, maybe more. They were moving in a line, walking from the main building toward Tank 19. They were all barefoot, all wearing what looked like white or pale-colored clothing. And they weren't talking. Not a sound. Just silent movement. I pulled out my phone and started recording. The camera quality wasn't great in the low light, but it was better than nothing. The line of people reached Tank 19 and formed a circle around it. They stood there, completely still, facing the tank. And then, slowly, they all raised their hands and placed them against the metal surface. I watched, frozen, as they stood like that for what felt like an eternity. No movement. No sound. Just 15 people standing in a circle, touching a locked water tank in the middle of the night. And then I heard it, a sound coming from inside the tank, a low, rhythmic thumping, like something heavy being dragged across metal. Thump, thump, thump. The people around the tank didn't react. They just stood there, hands pressed against the metal as the thumping continued. I felt my skin crawl. This wasn't trespassing. This wasn't vandalism. This was something else entirely. I needed to call this in. I needed backup. I started to back away, moving carefully, trying not to make any noise. But as I turned, my boot caught on a piece of rusted metal lying in the dirt. It scraped against the ground with a loud scraping sound. The thumping inside the tank stopped. All 15 people turned their heads toward me in perfect unison. I froze. They didn't move. They just stared. And even from 50 yards away, even in the dim light, I could see their faces. Blank, empty, wrong. I ran. I didn't think. I just ran back to my cruiser, got in, started the engine, and floored it out of there. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the steering wheel. "Sierra!" I shouted into the radio. "Sierra! I need backup at water tank 19. Now!" "Noah, what's going on?" "I don't know. There are people out here, a lot of them, and something's wrong. Something's really wrong. I'm dispatching units. ETA 10 minutes. Get out of there, Noah." "I'm already gone." I drove back to the main highway and pulled over, waiting for backup to arrive. My heart was racing. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. What the hell had I just seen? 10 minutes later, 2 patrol units arrived, Marcus and another deputy named Collins. I told them what I'd seen, showed them the video on my phone. Marcus watched it, his face grim. "Jesus Christ, Noah." "We need to go back," I said. "We need to find out what they were doing." Collins shook his head. "No, we need to call this in to the state police. This is way above our pay grade. They were trespassing on county property. Noah." Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. "Listen to me. We're not going back there tonight. We're going to file a report, and we're going to let someone else handle this. Understood?" I wanted to argue, but the look on his face stopped me. "Fine," I said. We drove back to the station and filed our reports. By the time I was done, it was almost 3 o'clock a.m. I went home, but I didn't sleep. I just kept thinking about those people, those blank faces, that sound inside the tank, and the way they'd all turned to look at me at the exact same moment. The next morning, I showed up at the station expecting some kind of follow-up, but there was nothing. No debriefing, no investigation. Just business as usual. I found Marcus in the break room. "What's going on? Did the state police go out to the facility?" He poured himself a coffee and didn't look at me. "I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know?" "I mean I filed my report, and I haven't heard anything back. That's how it works with Water Tank 19. "That's insane. We saw people out there. We saw something," Marcus said, finally meeting my eyes. "But we don't know what, and we're not going to know, because that's not our job." "Whose job is it?" He didn't answer. He just walked out of the break room. I spent the rest of the day trying to get answers. I called the sheriff's office. I called the state police. I even called the county administrator's office. No one would talk to me about Water Tank 19. It was like the place didn't exist. That night, I got a call from Sierra. "Noah, can you meet me somewhere? I need to talk to you." "Yeah, where?" "The diner on Route 8. Off duty. Don't tell anyone." An hour later, I was sitting across from Sierra in a booth at the back of the diner. She looked tired, worried. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she said, stirring her coffee. "But after what you saw last night, I think you deserve to know." "Know what?" "Water Tank 19 isn't just an old water treatment facility. It's something else. Something the county doesn't talk about." I leaned forward. "What is it?" "I don't know exactly, but I know it was shut down in 2003 after an incident. A worker died out there, drowned, supposedly, but the details were sealed. And after that, the county issued standing orders. No one patrols the facility after dark. No investigations. No questions. Why? Because people who go out there at night see things, hear things, and most of them don't want to talk about it afterward." She looked at me. "I've been dispatch for 12 years, Noah. And in that time, I've logged over 30 calls about activity at Water Tank 19. Every single one of them was at night, and every single one of them was ignored. 30 calls. At least, maybe more. I stopped counting after a while." She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "But here's the thing. The calls aren't from locals. They're from truckers passing through. People who don't know about the standing orders. And when they call, I'm supposed to log it and do nothing. That's not right. I know. But that's the policy." I sat back, trying to process everything. "So, what do I do?" Sierra looked at me for a long moment. "You do what everyone else does. You follow the orders. You stay away from that place at night, and you forget about what you saw. I can't just forget. Yes, you can. Because if you keep pushing this, you're going to end up like the others. Out of a job. Or worse." "What's worse?" She didn't answer. She just finished her coffee and stood up. "Be smart, Noah. Let this go." She left, and I sat there alone in the booth, staring out the window at the dark highway. But I knew I couldn't let it go, because I'd seen those people. I'd heard that sound, and I needed to know what was inside Tank 19. I spent the next week trying to dig up information about Water Tank 19. I searched county records, old newspaper archives, anything I could find online. But there was almost nothing. The facility was barely mentioned except for a few brief references in old budget reports and zoning documents. The only useful thing I found was a death certificate from 2003. Thomas Ridley, age 41, employee of Hackett County Water Authority. Cause of death: accidental drowning. He died at Water Tank 19 on October 7, 2003. 3 weeks later, the facility was decommissioned and permanently closed. I tried to find more details about how he drowned, but there was nothing. No incident report, no investigation, just a death certificate and a brief obituary that said he'd been a dedicated employee and loving father of 2. I managed to track down his widow, Margaret Ridley, still living in Hackett County. I called her, identifying myself as a deputy. "Mrs. Ridley, I'm looking into the history of Water Tank 19. I understand your husband worked there." There was a long silence on the other end. "Why are you asking about that place?" "Just routine. I'm trying to understand the facility's history. That place killed my husband, and the county paid me to keep quiet about it. So, no, I'm not interested in talking about it. Mrs. Ridley, please. Anything you could tell me. My husband drowned in an empty tank. Do you understand that? An empty tank. There was no water in it, but somehow he drowned. Her voice cracked. The county said it was an accident. They said he must have fallen and hit his head, and somehow water seeped in and he drowned. But that doesn't make any sense, and when I asked questions, they threatened to take away my survivor benefits. So I stopped asking. Do you know what he was doing at the facility that day? Maintenance inspection. He'd been going out there every week for months. Said something was wrong with Tank 19, said it needed to be shut down permanently. And 2 days after he filed his report, he was dead. My pulse quickened. Do you have a copy of that report? No, the county took all his files, sealed them. She paused, but I remember what he told me. He said there was water in Tank 19, even though the facility had been shut down for months. Even though all the pumps were offline, there was water in that tank, and it shouldn't have been there. What do you mean? He said the water was coming from somewhere else, somewhere underground. He wanted to drain the tank and investigate, but the county wouldn't authorize it. Said it was too expensive. And then he died. She took a shaky breath. Deputy, I don't know what you're investigating, but if it has anything to do with that place, my advice is to walk away. That facility isn't right. It never has been. She hung up before I could ask anything else. I sat there, staring at my phone, trying to piece it together. Thomas Ridley had found water in an empty tank. He'd wanted to investigate. And then he died. And now, 20 years later, people were gathering at that same tank in the middle of the night. What was in that water? That night, I was on patrol again. It was a quiet shift, a few traffic stops, one domestic disturbance call that turned out to be nothing. Around 1 o'clock a.m., I found myself driving on Route 211, not far from Water Tank 19. I knew I shouldn't. I knew I was supposed to stay away, but I couldn't stop thinking about what Mrs. Ridley had said. I pulled over to the side of the road about a mile from the facility and killed my lights. I sat there for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the radio, the occasional crackle of static. And then I heard something else. A voice coming through the radio, faint, distorted. Unit 12. I grabbed the handset. This is Unit 12. Go ahead, dispatch. Nothing, just static. Sierra, do you copy? More static. And then, through the white noise, I heard it again. The water. My skin crawled. That wasn't Sierra's voice. It was deeper. Wrong. Who is this? Oh, don't drink the water. The radio went dead. Complete silence. No static, no voices, nothing. I tried calling dispatch, no response. I tried my cell phone, no signal. I was about to start the engine and get the hell out of there when I saw them. Headlights, coming down the access road from Water Tank 19. A vehicle, moving slowly. No plates that I could see. I ducked down in my seat, watching as the vehicle reached Route 211 and turned south, away from me. It was an old van, dark-colored, windows tinted. I couldn't see who was driving. I waited until it was out of sight, then started my cruiser and followed at a distance, keeping my lights off. The van drove for about 3 miles, then turned onto a side road I'd never patrolled before. County Road 204. It was barely more than a dirt track, winding through thick forest. I followed, staying far enough back that they wouldn't see me. After about a mile, the van pulled into a clearing and stopped. I parked on the road and got out, moving quietly through the trees. I could see the van in the clearing, its engine still running. The driver's door opened and someone got out. It was too dark to see clearly, but I could make out a figure. Average height, wearing dark clothing. They walked to the back of the van and opened the rear doors. And then they started unloading bodies. Not dead bodies. These people were moving. But they were limp, being dragged out of the van one by one and laid on the ground in a line. I counted 6 of them, all barefoot, all wearing pale clothing. The driver stood over them for a moment, then walked back to the van and drove away. I stayed hidden in the trees, watching the 6 people on the ground. They didn't move, didn't make a sound. And then, slowly, they started to wake up. One by one, they sat up, and without saying a word, they stood and walked into the forest. Not together, just walking, in different directions, like they were heading home. I waited until they were gone, then stepped into the clearing. The ground where they'd been lying was damp, not from rain. It hadn't rained in days, just damp, like they'd been wet. I crouched down and touched the dirt. It was cold, and it smelled like rust, like old metal. I pulled out my flashlight and examined the tire tracks from the van. They were deep, like the vehicle had been heavily loaded. I took photos of everything, the tracks, the damp ground, the clearing. Then I got back in my cruiser and drove straight to the station. It was 2:30 a.m. by the time I got there. Marcus was on duty, filing paperwork in the break room. "Marcus, I need to talk to you." He looked up, saw my face, and sighed. "What did you do?" "I followed a van from Water Tank 19. It was carrying people. They dumped them in the woods and drove away." Marcus set down his pen and rubbed his face. "Jesus, Noah. I have photos. I have evidence. We need to do nothing." He stood up. "Noah, I'm going to give you the same advice I gave you before. Let this go." "I can't. There are people being transported from that facility in the middle of the night, and it's not our problem." "How is it not our problem? We're law enforcement." "We're here county deputies," Marcus said quietly. "We enforce county laws, and as far as the county is concerned, Water Tank 19 is off limits. Whatever happens out there, it's above our jurisdiction." "That's insane." "That's reality." He walked past me toward the door. "File your report if you want, but don't expect anyone to follow up on it. They never do." He left, and I stood there alone in the break room, feeling like I was losing my mind. But I filed the report anyway, detailed everything I'd seen, the van, the people, the clearing. And just like Marcus said, nothing happened. No follow-up, no investigation. The report just disappeared into the system. The next day, I called Sierra. "I need your help. Noah, I told you, I know what you told me, but I need to know something. Have there been any missing person reports in the area? People who disappeared near Water Tank 19? There was a long pause. "Why are you asking?" "Because I think people are being taken there, or brought there, I don't know. But something's happening, and the department is ignoring it." Sierra sighed. "Give me a few hours. I'll check the records." She called me back that evening. "Okay." I went through the archives. In the past 5 years, there have been 17 missing person reports filed in Hackett County. 6 of them were last seen on Route 211, near the water facility. 6? Yeah. All of them were eventually classified as voluntary disappearances or closed due to lack of evidence. But Noah, I pulled up the photos from their missing person reports, and I recognized 3 of them. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've seen them. After they went missing, walking on the side of the road near the facility, at night." My blood ran cold. "You saw them?" "Yeah. I thought maybe they'd come back, that maybe the cases should be reopened. But when I called it in, I was told to leave it alone." "Who told you that?" "My supervisor, the shift commander, everyone." Her voice dropped. "Noah, there's something going on at that facility, something the county knows about and doesn't want us investigating. And I think it's been going on for a long time." "How long?" "I don't know, but I found records going back to the 90s. reports of people behaving strangely near the facility, walking barefoot on the highway, standing in the woods, not responding to deputies. Every single report was closed with no follow-up. I felt sick. What are we supposed to do? We're supposed to do our jobs and not ask questions. She paused. But if you're asking what I think we should do, I think we should stay as far away from that place as possible. I can't do that. Then you're going to get yourself hurt, or worse. What's worse? She didn't answer. She just hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those 6 people, about the way they'd woken up in the clearing and walked into the forest like nothing was wrong. About the missing people who'd been seen walking near the facility after they'd disappeared. About Thomas Ridley drowning in an empty tank. There was something in that water. Something that changed people, and I needed to find out what it was. The next afternoon, I drove back out to Water Tank 19, during daylight, just to look around. The place was as deserted as always, but as I walked toward Tank 19, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The padlocks on the door were open, not broken, just unlocked, hanging loose on their chains. Someone had been inside recently. I approached the door slowly, my hand on my sidearm. The wheel lock turned easily, and the door swung open with a low metallic groan. Inside was darkness, and a smell. Damp, musty, like standing water. I pulled out my flashlight and shone it inside. The tank was massive, at least 30 feet in diameter, walls curving up into shadow. And at the bottom, maybe 10 feet down, was water. Dark water, still and silent. I leaned in, shining my light down. The water didn't reflect properly. It absorbed the light, swallowing it up like it was deeper than it should be. And then I saw something move. A ripple, starting from the center of the water, spreading outward. I stepped back, my heart racing. Something was in there. I slammed the door shut and backed away, my hands shaking. As I turned to leave, I saw them. Wet footprints, leading from the tank door toward the tree line. Fresh, like someone had just walked out of the water. I followed the prints into the trees, my flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. After about 50 yards, the prints stopped, just ended, like whoever had made them had simply vanished. I stood there surrounded by trees, and I felt it. That feeling of being watched. I turned slowly, scanning the forest, and then I saw it. A figure, standing between 2 trees, maybe 20 yards away. Pale clothing, bare feet, motionless, watching me. I unholstered my weapon. "Sheriff's Department, show me your hands." The figure didn't move. I said, "Show me your hands." Nothing. I started to move toward it, my weapon raised. And then it turned and walked deeper into the forest. Not running, just walking. Slow and deliberate. I should have called for backup. I should have returned to my cruiser, but I didn't. I followed. I moved through the trees, keeping the figure in sight. It never looked back, never hesitated, just kept walking. After about 10 minutes, I realized we were heading back toward Water Tank 19. And then the figure stopped. It stood at the edge of the clearing, facing the tank. And slowly, it raised one hand and pointed. I followed the gesture. And that's when I saw them. More figures, at least a dozen. Standing in a circle around Tank 19, their hands pressed against the metal, just like I'd seen before. I backed away, my weapon still raised. "Stay where you are!" None of them moved. They just stood there, touching the tank. And then, from inside the tank, I heard it. That sound, that low, rhythmic thumping. Thump, thump, thump. Like something heavy being dragged across metal. The figures around the tank began to move. In unison. They lowered their hands and turned toward me, and I saw their faces, Blank. Empty. Skin too pale, eyes too dark. They started walking toward me. I ran. I ran back through the forest back to my cruiser, got in, and floored it out of there. As I sped down Route 211, my radio crackled to life. Sierra's voice. "Unit 12, what's your status?" My voice was shaking. "I'm heading back to the station." "Copy that. You sound shaken. Are you okay?" I wanted to tell her. I wanted to explain what I'd just seen. But I couldn't. Because I knew she'd tell me to let it go. And I couldn't let it go, not anymore. The next morning, I went to see Alden Pike. He was the department's K-9 handler, a quiet guy in his late 40s who'd been with the sheriff's office for over 20 years. If anyone knew about Water Tank 19, it would be him. I found him in the training yard behind the station, working with his dog, a German shepherd named Ranger. "Alden, you got a minute?" He looked up, called Ranger to heel, and walked over. "What's up, Noah?" "I need to ask you about Water Tank 19. His expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten. "What about it?" "I've been out there a few times. I've seen things, strange things, and everyone keeps telling me to stay away, but no one will tell me why." Alden was quiet for a moment, then gestured toward a bench at the edge of the yard. "Sit down." We sat. Ranger settled at Alden's feet, panting softly. "How much do you know?" Alden asked. "I know the facility was shut down in 2003 after a worker died. I know there are standing orders not to patrol it at night. And I know people are gathering there, people who don't act right." Alden nodded slowly. "You're not wrong about any of it. So, what's going on?" He was quiet for a long time, staring out at the training yard. "About 15 years ago, I was called out to Water Tank 19. Middle of the night, report of a trespasser." "You went?" "Yeah, I was young, stupid. Didn't know about the standing orders yet." He rubbed Ranger's head absently. "I took Ranger's predecessor, Max, and we went out there. Found the gate open, just like you probably did. Walked into the complex. What did you find?" "People. Maybe 20 of them, all standing around Tank 19. Just standing there, not moving, not talking. I called out to them, identified myself as law enforcement. They didn't respond." "What did you do?" "I approached, told them they were trespassing, that they needed to leave. And that's when Max started acting strange. He was trained to be aggressive when needed, but he wasn't aggressive. He was scared. I'd never seen him scared before." Alden's voice dropped. He started backing away from the tank, whining, and then he just ran back to the cruiser and wouldn't come out. "What about the people?" "I got within about 10 yards of them when I realized they were all soaking wet. Clothes, hair, everything. Like they'd just climbed out of the tank. But the tank door was locked, still is." He shook his head. "And then they all turned to look at me at the same time. Same movement, same blank expression, and I felt it." "Felt what?" "Terror. Pure terror. Like every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run. So I did. I got back to my cruiser and got the hell out of there." "Did you file a report?" "Yeah, it was ignored. And the next day, my supervisor pulled me aside and told me I'd never be sent to that facility again. That from now on, it was off limits." He looked at me. "Max died 3 months later. Cancer. The vet said it was one of the most aggressive cases he'd ever seen. Said it was like something had poisoned him." "You think it was related to the tank?" "I don't know. But Max was healthy before that night, and after? He was never the same." Alden stood up. "Noah, I'm telling you this because you seem like a good guy, and I don't want to see you end up like the others. Stay away from that place." Whatever's there, it's not something we can handle. What if we got a K-9 unit to go out there with me? During the day?" Alden looked down at Ranger and shook his head. "Not a chance. I'm not putting Ranger through what Max went through, and neither is any other handler." He walked away, leaving me sitting alone on the bench. I spent the rest of the day thinking about what Alden had said, about Max, about the way the dog had reacted to the tank. Animals have instincts humans don't. They can sense things we can't. And if Max had been terrified of Tank 19, there was a reason. That night, I was on patrol again. Around midnight, I got a call from Sierra. "Noah, I've got something weird." "What is it?" "I just took a 911 call from a woman on Route 211. She says her husband stopped to help someone on the side of the road, and he hasn't come back. She's been sitting in her car for 20 minutes waiting for him." My stomach dropped. "Where on Route 211? "About 2 miles south of Water Tank 19. "I'm on my way." I drove to the location, lights and sirens off. When I arrived, I found a sedan parked on the shoulder, hazard lights flashing. A woman was sitting in the driver's seat crying. I approached the vehicle. "Ma'am, I'm Deputy Lemick. You called 911? She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "My husband, he stopped to help someone." A person was standing on the side of the road, waving us down. My husband pulled over and got out to see if they needed help, and then he just walked away into the trees. I called after him, but he didn't answer. He's been gone for almost half an hour. Did you see the person he was helping?" I saw them for a second. They were wearing pale clothes, bare feet, but I didn't see their face. My pulse quickened. "Stay in your vehicle. Lock the doors. I'm going to find your husband." I grabbed my flashlight and walked to the tree line where the woman had pointed. I could see footprints in the soft dirt, 2 sets, one wearing shoes, one barefoot. I followed them into the forest, calling out, "Sheriff's Department, if you can hear me, make a sound." No response. The footprints led deeper into the trees, winding through the underbrush. And then they stopped, just like the ones I'd found before, both sets, like the 2 people had simply vanished. I stood there, shining my light in all directions, trying to make sense of it. And then I heard a voice, faint, coming from somewhere ahead. "Help!" I moved toward the sound, my hand on my weapon. "Where are you?" "Help me." I pushed through a thicket of brush and emerged into a small clearing. And there, standing in the center, was a man, mid-40s, wearing jeans and a jacket, soaking wet. "Sir, are you okay?" He turned to look at me. His eyes were wrong, too dark, too empty. "Help me." I took a step closer. "Sir, I'm Deputy Lemick. Your wife is worried about you. Let's get you back to the car." He didn't move. He just stared at me. And then he opened his mouth and water poured out. Not a little, a lot. It cascaded down his chin, soaking his shirt, pooling at his feet. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding. He closed his mouth and took a step toward me. "Stay back." I drew my weapon. "Don't move." He took another step. I fired a warning shot into the air. The sound echoed through the trees. He stopped, tilted his head, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. And then he turned and walked into the forest. Not running, just walking, calm and deliberate. I stood there shaking, trying to process what I'd just seen. When I got back to the sedan, the woman was still in the driver's seat. "Did you find him?" I didn't know what to say. I couldn't tell her what I'd seen. She wouldn't believe me. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me back to the station. We're going to file a missing person report and get some units out here to search the area." "But my husband, We'll find him, I promise. I didn't promise that he'd be okay, because I didn't think he would be. We drove back to the station, and I helped her file the report. By the time I was done, it was almost 3 a.m. Marcus found me in the break room, staring at a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. I heard about the call, the missing husband. Yeah. Did you find him? I found something. Marcus sat down across from me. Noah, you need to stop. Whatever you're doing, whatever you're investigating, it's going to get you killed, or worse. What's worse than killed, Marcus? He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, I don't know. But I've seen what happens to people who go out to that facility too many times. They change. They're not the same anymore. What do you mean they change? I mean, they stop sleeping, stop eating, they just exist. And eventually they disappear, just like the others. I looked at him. How many others? More than you think. I went home that morning and tried to sleep, but I couldn't. I kept seeing that man in the clearing, the water pouring from his mouth. Around noon, I got a call from Sierra. Noah, you need to hear this. What is it? The missing husband from last night. He just walked into the station. I sat up. What? Yeah, he walked in about 10 minutes ago. Said he got lost in the woods and spent the night out there. His wife is here. She's crying, hugging him. He seems fine. I'm on my way. When I got to the station, the husband was sitting in the lobby with his wife. He looked perfectly normal. Dry clothes. No sign of the water I'd seen pouring from his mouth. I approached him. Sir, I'm Deputy Lemick. I was the one who responded to your wife's call last night. He looked up at me and smiled. Thank you, Deputy. I'm sorry for the trouble. I guess I just got turned around in the woods. His voice was normal. His eyes were normal. But something about him was wrong. I could feel it. Can I ask where you spent the night? I found a dry spot under a tree, fell asleep. Woke up this morning and walked back to the road. You weren't cold. You didn't call out for help. I was a little cold, but I'm fine now. He stood up, thanked me again, and left with his wife. I watched them go, and I knew. I knew he wasn't fine. He was one of them now. Whatever was in that tank, whatever was in that water, it had changed him. And there was nothing I could do about it. I couldn't let it go. Not after what I'd seen. Not after the husband walked out of the woods like nothing had happened. I spent the next 3 days reviewing every report, every call, every piece of information I could find about Water Tank 19. And the more I dug, the more I realized how deep this went. There had been incidents dating back to the 1970s, long before the facility was even built. Reports of people acting strangely near the site, walking into the woods and not coming back, or coming back different. The facility had been built in 1982, and for 20 years it operated normally. Just a water treatment plant serving the rural parts of Hackett County. And then, in 2003, Thomas Ridley drowned in Tank 19. After that, everything changed. The facility was shut down. The standing orders were issued, and the county stopped talking about it. But the incidents didn't stop. If anything, they increased. I made a decision. I was going to Tank 19 one more time, at night, and I was going to find out what was inside that water. I didn't tell anyone. Not Sierra, not Marcus, not Alden. I just went. It was a Wednesday night, around 1 a.m. I drove to the facility in my personal truck, not my cruiser. I wore civilian clothes and brought a waterproof flashlight, a rope, and a small sample container. The gate was open, like always. I parked near the main building and walked to Tank 19, my heart pounding. The padlocks on the door were unlocked again. I opened it and shone my light inside. The water was still there. Dark. Still. waiting. I tied one end of the rope to the exterior ladder and lowered myself down to the water's surface. The smell was overwhelming, rust and decay, and something else. Something organic. I knelt at the edge and dipped the sample container into the water. It was cold. So cold it burned. As I pulled the container out, I saw something move beneath the surface. A shape, large, shifting. I scrambled back, dropping the container. It fell into the water and sank immediately, disappearing into the darkness. And then the water began to ripple, not from the container, from something else. Something was rising. I climbed the rope as fast as I could, my hands slipping on the wet fiber. Behind me, I could hear the water churning. I reached the top and pulled myself out of the tank, slamming the door shut behind me. And then I heard it. A voice, coming from inside the tank. My voice. Unit 12, what's your location? I backed away, my legs shaking. The door began to shake. Something was pushing against it from the inside. I ran. I ran to my truck, got in, and drove away as fast as I could. But as I sped down the access road, I looked in my rearview mirror, and I saw them. Dozens of figures, pouring out of the tree line, walking toward the tank. All of them soaking wet. All of them barefoot. And in the center of the group, walking calmly, was the missing husband from 3 nights ago. I drove straight home and locked every door and window. I sat in my living room with my gun on the coffee table, staring at the front door, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did, but around 3:00 a.m. my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Hello? Static. And then, through the white noise, I heard it. My own voice. Help, me, I hung up. The next morning, I called in sick. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't face anyone. I spent the day researching, trying to find answers. And I found something. A geological survey from 1979, before the facility was built. It mentioned an underground aquifer beneath the site, but not a normal aquifer. The survey noted unusual mineral composition and unexplained water flow patterns. It recommended against drilling in the area, but they'd built the facility anyway, and they'd drilled into Tank 19. They'd tapped into something that shouldn't have been disturbed. That night, Sierra called me. Noah, where have you been? Everyone's looking for you. I'm at home. I'm sick. You don't sound sick. You sound scared. I didn't respond. Noah, what did you do? I went to the tank. Last night, I went inside. There was a long silence. Jesus Christ, Noah. I needed to know. I needed to see what was in there. And what did you see? I don't know, but it saw me. Sierra's voice dropped to a whisper. You need to leave tonight. Get out of Hackett County and don't come back. I can't just leave. Yes, you can. Because if you stay, you're going to end up like the others. Trust me. She paused. I've been dispatched for 12 years, Noah, and I've learned one thing. Some places aren't meant to be understood. They're meant to be avoided. But the people are gone. They're not coming back. Not as themselves. Her voice cracked. Please, Noah. Just go. She hung up. I sat there in my apartment staring at my phone. And then I heard it. A knock at my door. I grabbed my gun and moved to the window, looking out. There was someone standing on my porch. Pale clothing, bare feet, soaking wet. It was the missing husband. He knocked again. I didn't answer. He stood there for a long time, not moving, not leaving. And then, slowly, he turned and walked away. I watched him disappear down the street and I made my decision. I packed a bag, got in my truck, and I left. I drove for 3 hours, putting as much distance between myself and Hackett County as I could. I've been gone for 2 weeks now. I found a cheap motel in another state, and I've been staying here trying to figure out what to do next. But every night, around 3 a.m., my phone rings. Unknown number. And every night I hear the same thing. My own voice through the static. Help me. I don't answer anymore. But I know what it means. I went into the water, I touched it. And now it's calling me back. Last night I woke up at 3 a.m. to find my clothes soaking wet. I was standing in the shower, fully dressed, water running over me. I don't remember getting up. I don't remember turning on the water. But I was there, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw it. My eyes, too dark, too empty. I'm changing, just like the others, and I know, eventually, I'll go back. I'd been a state trooper for 6 years when I got transferred to District 9, which covered the rural northeastern corner of the state, mostly farmland, forest, and forgotten stretches of highway that nobody used anymore. The kind of territory where you could drive for an hour without seeing another vehicle, where the radio crackled with static more than it carried voices, and where the nearest backup might be 40 minutes away on a good day. My name's Jonas Cregan, and I'd requested the transfer myself. I wanted something quieter after spending 3 years working the interstate corridor downstate, dealing with drug runners and high-speed chases and endless accident scenes that left images in my head I couldn't shake. The constant adrenaline, the violence, the bodies. It was wearing me down. District 9 seemed like the perfect place to wind down the last decade of my career before retirement. Quiet roads, simple traffic stops, maybe the occasional domestic dispute or trespassing call. Nothing that would keep me up at night. My first day at the district station, the shift commander, Lieutenant Haskell, called me into his office for the standard orientation briefing. He was a lean guy in his 50s with gray hair cut military short and the kind of weathered face that came from 30 years of night shifts and cigarettes. His office was sparse, just a metal desk, a filing cabinet, and a wall covered with maps of the district marked up with colored pins and handwritten notes. "Cregan, welcome to District 9. Have a seat." He gestured to a chair that looked like it had been there since the station was built in the 70s. "You've got Patrol Zone 3, which includes Highway 46, routes 12 through 19, and all the county roads in between." He spread a laminated map across his desk and pointed to a section highlighted in yellow. "This is your area, mostly farmland, some state forest. Population density is low. Call volume is even lower. You'll spend most of your shifts just driving and staying visible." "Sounds good to me, sir." I leaned forward to study the map, tracing the roads with my finger. "There's one thing you need to know." He tapped a section of the map where a red line cut across Highway 46 like a scar. Highway 46 was closed 8 years ago. Landslide took out a tunnel and part of the roadbed. It's been barricaded ever since. You'll see the barriers at mile marker 32. I leaned closer to look at the map. The highway ran for about 40 miles through the district before dead-ending at the red line. "Is it safe to patrol near the closure?" "You don't patrol it at all." He said it flatly, like he was reading from a script he'd memorized years ago. "Day or night, the road is closed. There's nothing to patrol." I frowned. "What if someone reports activity there? Trespassers, vandalism, anything like that?" "Then you log it and move on. The closure is state property. Maintenance handles it." "State maintenance?" "That's right." He rolled up the map and handed it to me, his expression making it clear the topic was closed. "Any other questions?" I had about a dozen, but his tone made it obvious the conversation was over. "No, sir." "Good. Get out there and familiarize yourself with your zone. Radio check every hour." "And Cregan?" He looked at me over his reading glasses, his eyes hard. Stay away from Highway 46. That's not a suggestion. That's a standing order that's been in place since the closure. You follow it, or you don't work in this district. Clear? Clear, sir. I left his office wondering what the hell was so special about a closed highway. In my 6 years as a trooper, I'd seen plenty of road closures, construction, accidents, weather damage, but I'd never seen one where we were explicitly ordered not to patrol it. Usually, closed roads attracted trouble. Kids looking for a place to party, dumpers getting rid of trash, squatters setting up camps. Standard procedure was to check them regularly, make sure the barriers were intact, run off anyone who didn't belong. But not Highway 46. Highway 46 was different, apparently. That afternoon, I drove my patrol route, getting a feel for the territory. It was exactly as advertised, quiet to the point of eerie. I passed through 3 small towns, each one barely more than a main street with a post office and a general store. I checked in with the local sheriff's departments, introduced myself, established the usual professional relationships. Then I spent most of the day driving empty 2-lane roads through endless fields of corn and soybean, past abandoned farmhouses and rusted silos, through patches of dense forest where the trees grew right up to the edge of the asphalt. The whole district had a feeling of slow decay, like civilization had tried to take root here and mostly failed. For every working farm, there were 2 or 3 abandoned ones. For every occupied house, there were empty ones with boarded windows and caved-in roofs. The people I saw looked worn down, like the landscape itself was grinding them into dust. Around 4:00 p.m., I found myself approaching Highway 46. I hadn't planned to go there, but the route I was following naturally led toward it, and I figured it wouldn't hurt to at least see what the closure looked like, just to orient myself. Know the boundaries of my patrol zone. The entrance was marked by large orange barriers, the kind made of reinforced concrete, each one weighing at least a ton. They were positioned across both lanes, completely blocking access. Behind them was a permanent electronic sign, its message clear: road closed, no access. Violators will be prosecuted. But as I pulled closer, I noticed something. The barriers weren't flush against each other. There was a gap on the right side, maybe 3 feet wide, just wide enough for a vehicle to squeeze through if the driver was careful. I pulled over onto the shoulder and got out to take a look. The barriers were heavy concrete blocks, the kind that usually took a truck and a crew to move. But someone had moved them. Recently, judging by the fresh scrape marks in the asphalt, black rubber streaks and stone dust that hadn't been washed away by rain yet. I walked past the barriers onto Highway 46 itself. The road looked normal at first. 2 lanes, faded yellow line down the center, asphalt cracked and sprouting weeds but still intact. I could see for maybe a 1/4 mile before the road curved and disappeared into the trees. The forest on both sides was thick, pressing in close to the pavement like it was trying to reclaim the highway. Nothing about it looked particularly dangerous or unusual, just an old highway, abandoned and overgrown. The kind of road you could find anywhere in rural America, slowly being forgotten as traffic patterns changed and newer routes were built. But something about it felt wrong. The air was colder here, even though the sun was still shining, and it was a warm September afternoon. And it was too quiet. No birds singing in the trees. No insects buzzing. No wind rustling the leaves. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes you aware of your own breathing, your own heartbeat. I stood there for a moment, listening to nothing, and felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was the same feeling I'd gotten a few times in my career, walking up to a car during a traffic stop and sensing somehow that the driver was armed, standing outside a house on a domestic call and knowing, before the door even opened, that things were about to go bad. that primal warning system that evolution had given us, telling us when we were in danger. I shook it off and walked back to my cruiser. Probably just my imagination, fueled by Haskell's weird warning and the creepy atmosphere of the abandoned road. I radioed in, keeping my voice casual. "Dispatch, this is Trooper Cregan, Unit 47. I'm at the Highway 46 closure, mile marker 32. Barriers have been moved. Looks like possible unauthorized access." The dispatcher, a woman named Monica, who I'd met briefly that morning, responded after a pause. "Copy, Unit 47. Are you requesting maintenance?" "I'm requesting an explanation. Who's authorized to move these barriers?" Another pause, longer this time. I could hear her typing on a keyboard, consulting something. "Stand by, Unit 47. I waited, leaning against my cruiser, watching the gap between the barriers. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I was about to call again when a different voice came through the radio. Male. Older. Authority radiating through the static. "Unit 47, this is Lieutenant Haskell. What's your status?" "I'm at the Highway 46 closure, sir. The barriers have been moved. I was just reporting, get back in your vehicle and clear the area. Now." His tone stopped me cold. "Sir, that's an order, Trooper. Clear the area and continue your patrol. Do not investigate the barrier movement. Do not file a report about it. Is that understood?" I felt a spike of irritation. I'd been a trooper for 6 years. I knew how to do my job. "Sir, if someone's accessing a closed road," I said, "is that understood, Trooper Cregan?" His voice was ice. "Understood, sir." "Good. Continue your patrol. Haskell out." The radio went dead. I stood there for a moment, staring at it, then got back in my cruiser and drove away. But I kept glancing in my rearview mirror at Highway 46, watching it disappear behind me, and the questions kept piling up in my head. Why was Haskell so insistent that I stay away? Why didn't he want me to report the moved barriers? And why did he sound almost scared? That night, I stopped by the district station to file my daily report. The building was quiet. Most of the day shift already gone home. I found another trooper in the break room, a younger guy named Ellis, maybe late 20s, making coffee that smelled like it had been sitting in the pot since morning. "Ellis, you been working District 9 long?" He looked up, sizing me up with the careful neutrality that cops use with each other until they figure out if you're trustworthy. 3 years. "You're the new guy, right? Cregan?" "That's me. Can I ask you something?" "Sure." He poured himself a cup of the toxic-looking coffee. "What's the deal with Highway 46? His hand froze on the coffee pot. For just a second, his expression changed. Something flashed across his face that looked like fear. Then it was gone, replaced by studied indifference. "You went out there?" "Just to the barrier. Noticed someone had moved it. When I reported it, Haskell practically ripped my head off. Told me to clear out and not file a report." Ellis set down the pot and lowered his voice, glancing toward the door to make sure we were alone. "Because that road is off limits. Has been since before I got here. And the guys who don't respect that end up transferred. Or worse. Worse how? I don't know exactly, but there was a trooper a few years back, guy named Patterson, Derek Patterson. Good guy, good cop. He'd been in the district for like 8 years, knew it inside and out. But he got obsessed with Highway 46, started patrolling it at night against orders, filing reports about unusual activity, lights on the road, vehicles that shouldn't have been there. Ellis took a sip of his coffee, grimaced. Then one day he just didn't show up for his shift. They found his cruiser parked at the barrier, doors open, engine running, radio still on. No sign of Patterson. He was just gone. My chest tightened. What happened to him? Nobody knows. Official reports said he abandoned his post and resigned. But that's bullshit. Patterson wasn't the type to just walk away from a job. And his wife, she said he'd never do that. Said he'd been acting strange for weeks before he disappeared. Couldn't sleep. Kept waking up in the middle of the night saying he heard things. Kept talking about lights on the highway. Lights? That's what she said. He told her he'd seen lights on Highway 46 at night. Vehicle lights, but not moving like normal traffic. Just sitting there in the dark. And when he'd go to investigate, they'd disappear. Ellis dumped out his coffee and rinsed the cup. My advice? Stay away from that road. Whatever's going on there, it's above our pay grade. Way above. You think something's really going on, or is it just rumors? I think if the lieutenant tells you to stay away from something, you stay away. Unless you want to end up like Patterson. He grabbed his jacket from the back of a chair. Look, Cregan, you seem like a decent guy. So I'm telling you this for your own good. There are parts of this district we patrol and parts we don't. Highway 46 is in the don't category, always has been, always will be. You follow that rule, you'll have a nice, quiet career here. You break it, he shrugged. Well, Patterson broke it, and now he's gone. He left, and I sat there in the break room, thinking. A trooper had disappeared near Highway 46, and instead of launching a massive investigation, instead of treating it like the serious incident it was, the department had covered it up with a story about resignation and abandonment. That wasn't right. That wasn't how things were supposed to work. But I also knew that Ellis was giving me good advice. I was new to this district. I didn't know the politics, didn't know who to trust. If I went charging and asking questions and demanding investigations, I'd probably just get myself transferred out. Or worse, I should have let it go. Should have followed orders and focused on the rest of my patrol zone, which was plenty big enough to keep me busy. But I've never been good at letting things go. Especially when something doesn't make sense. Especially when I smell a cover-up. Over the next week, I drove past the Highway 46 closure every day as part of my normal patrol route. During daylight hours only, staying well back from the barriers, just observing, not investigating, just looking. The barriers were always moved slightly, never in the same position. Sometimes the gap was on the right side, sometimes the left. Once, both barriers were pushed back several feet, leaving the entire road open, like someone was accessing the road regularly and not bothering to put the barriers back exactly where they'd been. Or like they wanted them moved, wanted the road accessible. On Friday afternoon, my 7th day in the district, I decided to take a closer look. I parked my cruiser on the shoulder about 100 yards from the barriers and walked up on foot, moving casually like I was just stretching my legs. If anyone was watching, I wanted to look innocent. Just a bored trooper taking a walk. The road beyond the barriers was empty, as always. But as I stood there, pretending to check my phone, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Tire tracks. Fresh ones. The tread pattern still sharp and clear. Leading past the barriers and onto the closed highway. Not just one vehicle. Multiple vehicles. Different tread patterns. Different widths. Cars, trucks, maybe even something larger. And judging by how fresh the tracks were, how they overlapped each other, there had been traffic here within the last day or two. A lot of traffic. I crouched down and examined the tracks more closely. Some of them were standard civilian tire patterns, the kind you'd see on any car or truck. But others were different. Heavier tread, wider spacing. Fleet vehicles, maybe. Government issue. I pulled out my phone and took a few photos, keeping the camera angle low so it wouldn't be obvious what I was doing. Then I followed the tracks with my eyes, watching them curve away into the trees. The road bent to the right about a quarter mile ahead, and I couldn't see past the curve, but I wanted to. I wanted to follow those tracks, see where they led, find out what was happening on this supposedly closed highway. I took a step past the barriers, then stopped. Haskell's warning echoed in my head. Stay away. Don't investigate. Follow orders. But those tire tracks were evidence of ongoing trespassing at minimum, maybe something worse. It was my job to investigate. My duty. I walked forward, following the tracks. 50 yards, 100. The trees pressed in on both sides, their shadows dark and cool. The silence was oppressive, broken only by my footsteps on the cracked asphalt. 200 yards. The road curved to the right, and as I came around the bend, I saw it. The tunnel. It was built into the side of a hill, a concrete portal maybe 20 feet wide and 15 feet high. The entrance was dark, a perfect rectangle of shadow against the gray concrete. I could see where the roadbed had partially collapsed on the right side, the landslide that had supposedly closed the highway 8 years ago. A pile of dirt and broken concrete had spilled across the right lane, narrowing the passage. But the left lane was clear, completely passable. And the tire tracks led straight into the tunnel, disappearing into the darkness. I approached slowly, every instinct telling me to turn around and get the hell out of there. The tunnel mouth looked like a giant throat, ready to swallow me. The air coming out of it was cold and damp, carrying a smell I couldn't identify. Not quite decay, not quite chemical. Something in between. The entrance was covered in warning signs, all of them official-looking. Danger, structural instability, do not enter. Closed by order of State Highway Department. Violators will be prosecuted. But the signs were old, faded, covered in moss and bird droppings. They'd been here for years, weathering in place, and nobody had bothered to replace or maintain them. I pulled out my flashlight and shone it into the tunnel. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing concrete walls stained with water damage and age. The tunnel ran for maybe 300 feet before curving slightly to the left. I could see daylight at the far end. The tunnel went all the way through the hill, just like it was supposed to. And in the darkness, about halfway through, I saw something that made my pulse quicken and my hand instinctively move toward my sidearm. Lights. Small, red lights mounted on the ceiling, evenly spaced, maybe 10 of them running the length of the tunnel. They weren't on at the moment, but they were there, and they looked new. The housings were clean, free of the grime and age that covered everything else. Someone had installed these lights recently. Within the last few years, maybe the last few months. Why would someone install lights in a supposedly abandoned tunnel? I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. The temperature dropped immediately. It had to be at least 10 degrees colder in here than outside. The air was thick and damp, and that strange smell was stronger. I could identify part of it now. Exhaust fumes, recent ones. Vehicles had been through here, a lot of them. I walked deeper, my flashlight beam sweeping across the walls and ceiling. No graffiti, which was unusual for an abandoned structure. No beer cans, no trash, no evidence of teenagers using it as a party spot. The tunnel was clean. Too clean for something that had supposedly been closed for 8 years. Halfway through, I stopped beneath one of the red lights and examined it. It was a standard emergency beacon, the kind you'd see in a parking garage or a maintenance corridor. Battery-powered, with a motion sensor mounted beneath it. I waved my hand beneath the sensor experimentally. Nothing happened. The light didn't turn on. But as I lowered my hand, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A sound coming from deeper in the tunnel, from the direction of the far exit. An engine, distant but growing louder, the low rumble of a heavy vehicle moving slowly through the tunnel. Someone was coming. I turned and ran back toward the entrance. my boots pounding on the concrete, the sound echoing and re-echoing until it seemed like a dozen people were running. Behind me, the engine noise grew louder, closer, the rumble filling the tunnel and making the air vibrate. I burst out of the tunnel into the daylight and kept running, back toward the barriers, back toward my cruiser. My heart was hammering in my chest, adrenaline flooding my system. As I reached the barriers, I looked back over my shoulder. A vehicle was emerging from the tunnel. A dark SUV with heavily tinted windows, government plates, no markings. It slowed as it reached the tunnel entrance, then stopped completely. I couldn't see the driver through the tinted glass, but I knew they could see me. I was in full uniform, standing in the middle of a closed highway, obviously somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. We stayed like that for what felt like forever, but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. Me standing by the barriers, frozen like a deer in headlights. The SUV sitting at the tunnel entrance, engine idling, dark windows revealing nothing. Then it backed up slowly, turned around inside the tunnel mouth and disappeared back into the darkness. Like it had decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Or like whoever was driving didn't want to be seen any more than I wanted to see them. I stood there, breathing hard, my hand still on my sidearm even though I hadn't drawn it. Then I got back in my cruiser and drove straight to the station, my mind racing. There were vehicles using Highway 46, active vehicles with government plates, and there were lights installed in the tunnel, motion sensors, signs of regular maintenance. This wasn't an abandoned road. This was an active access route to something the state police were supposed to stay away from. Why? I found Lieutenant Haskell in his office, working on paperwork. When I knocked on the doorframe, he looked up and immediately his expression went hard. "Sir, I need to report something." He set down his pen slowly. "You went to Highway 46 again." It wasn't a question, somehow he already knew. "Yes, sir, and I saw—" "I don't care what you saw." He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "Trooper Cregan, I gave you a direct order to stay away from that location. You disobeyed that order. Sir, there are vehicles using that road. Active vehicles with government plates. And there are lights installed in the tunnel. New lights with motion sensors. Stop." He held up a hand, his face flushed with anger. Or maybe fear. "I'm going to say this once, and you're going to listen. Highway 46 is not your concern. It's not my concern. It's handled by a different agency. Whatever you saw, whoever you saw, it's none of your business. None of our business." "What agency?" "I don't know. And neither do you. And we're both going to keep it that way." He sat back down, picked up his pen like the conversation was over. "You're a good trooper, Cregan. I looked at your record before approving your transfer. You're competent, you're thorough, you follow procedure. Don't throw your career away over this. Go back to your patrol zone and forget about Highway 46. "Sir, with all due respect—" "Dismissed, trooper." His tone left no room for argument. I left his office feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. The department knew about the activity on Highway 46. They had to know. And they were deliberately ignoring it, deliberately keeping troopers away from it. Which meant whatever was happening there had official sanction. Or at least official protection. Why? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed in my small apartment, a one-bedroom place in a complex that catered mostly to state workers, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the SUV, about the lights in the tunnel, about Trooper Patterson, who'd disappeared after investigating the same road. Around 2:00 a.m., I gave up on sleep and made myself a pot of coffee. Then I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started digging. Highway 46 had been built in 1967, part of a state expansion project to connect rural counties and improve commerce. It was one of dozens of roads built during that era, when the state had money and ambition and a belief that highways would bring prosperity to forgotten corners of the state. The tunnel, officially designated as Tunnel 46A, had been completed in 1969. It cut through Barker's Hill, saving drivers a detour of about 15 miles around the ridge. For 30 years, it had been a normal highway, carrying modest but steady traffic between two rural counties. Then, in 2017, the landslide happened. Or supposedly happened. I searched for news reports about it. Local papers, state news sites, anything. And found almost nothing. No coverage in the local paper. No press releases from the state transportation department. No mentions in the state police reports for that period. Just a brief note in the district maintenance log, which I accessed through the state police database. Highway 46 closed indefinitely due to structural failure. Barriers installed per order of State Transportation Director. That was it. No details about the landslide itself. No reports of injuries or property damage. No environmental impact assessment, which was usually required for that kind of geological event. Just closed. I dug deeper, going back further, found a geological survey from 2016, 1 year before the closure, that mentioned the area around the tunnel. The survey, commissioned by the State Environmental Department, noted unusual seismic activity and unexplained ground vibrations near mile marker 35 of Highway 46. Mile marker 35 was right where the tunnel was located. The survey recommended further investigation and continuous monitoring, but there was no follow-up report. Nothing. Like the investigation had been shut down before it could produce results. I kept searching, found something else that made my instincts tingle. A property record from 2015 showing that the state had purchased a large tract of land adjacent to Highway 46. 300 acres of forest and hillside, bought from a private owner named Gerald Hutchins for $2.3 million. The purpose listed on the deed, transportation infrastructure development, but no development had ever happened. I checked the property records through the present day. No buildings permitted, no construction reports, no environmental reviews. The land just sat there, owned by the state, fenced and empty. Or, supposedly, empty. I zoomed in on the satellite imagery of the area. The property was heavily forested. The trees thick enough that you couldn't see the ground in most places, but I could make out what looked like a cleared area near the center. Maybe 10 acres of open ground. And in that clearing, something that might have been buildings. The resolution wasn't good enough to be sure. I saved the images and kept digging. Found budget reports for the State Transportation Department from 2017, the year of the closure. Buried in the line items was an entry for Highway 46 Site Maintenance and Security, with a budget allocation of $450,000 per year. $450,000 every year for 8 years. To maintain a closed highway? That didn't make sense. You didn't spend nearly $500,000 a year to maintain a road nobody used. You spent maybe $50,000 to keep the barriers in place and repaint the warning signs every few years. What was that money actually paying for? I was still searching at 5 o'clock a.m. when my alarm went off. I showered, got into uniform, and headed to the station for my shift, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. But my mind was sharp, focused, racing with possibilities. During my morning briefing, I kept my mouth shut. Didn't mention Highway 46. Didn't ask questions. Just took my assignment. Same patrol zone as always, and headed out. But instead of following my normal route, I drove to the nearest town to Highway 46, a place called Ridgeway, population 800 according to the faded sign at the town limits. Ridgeway was the kind of town that time had passed by. One main street with a few shops, a diner, a post office, a gas station that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. Half the storefronts were empty, windows boarded or broken. The people I saw moving along the sidewalks looked worn down, faces lined with worry and hard work. I parked in front of the diner, a chrome-sided building called Marge's Place, and went inside. The interior was pure Americana. Red vinyl booths, checkered floor tiles, a long counter with chrome stools. A few locals were scattered around, drinking coffee and eating breakfast. They all looked up when I walked in, their conversations dying, that instinctive wariness that small-town people have toward outsiders, especially outsiders in uniform. I took a seat at the counter. A waitress in her 60s approached, coffee pot in hand, name tag reading Doreen. She had the weathered look of someone who'd worked this job for decades, friendly but tired. "Morning, officer. Coffee?" "Please." She filled a mug and set it in front of me. "You're not from around here. Just transferred to District 9, working patrol in this area." I added cream to my coffee, keeping my tone casual. "Trying to get to know the territory. Long way from the district station." She refilled the mug of a farmer 2 stools down. "I like to be thorough. Mind if I ask you something?" "Depends on what you're asking." But she smiled when she said it. "Highway 46. I heard it was closed a few years back. Landslide, right?" The smile faded. She glanced around the diner, then lowered her voice. "That's what they said." "You don't believe it?" She set down the coffee pot and leaned on the counter. "Highway 46 has been closed for 8 years. And in those 8 years, I've seen more traffic on that road than I ever saw when it was open." My pulse quickened. I kept my voice neutral. "What kind of traffic?" "Government vehicles. Big SUVs with tinted windows, construction trucks, unmarked vans, all headed toward the tunnel, usually at night." She glanced around again, making sure no one else was listening. "My nephew works for the county road crew. He says the state pays them a retainer to keep the barriers moved aside at night. Says there are vehicles going in and out all the time, sometimes a dozen in one night. But nobody's supposed to talk about it." "Why not?" "Because the people who use that road don't want to be noticed. And if you notice them, bad things happen." "Like what?" She straightened up, her expression going careful. "Like you lose your job, or your business gets hit with code violations you can't fight, or the bank suddenly calls in your loan, or your kid gets pulled over every week for nothing, gets tickets you can't afford." She picked up the coffee pot again. "People around here learned a long time ago, officer. You don't ask questions about Highway 46. You don't talk about what you see. You just stay away and mind your own business. What if I told you I was going to look into it? Make sure everything's legitimate?" She looked at me for a long moment, something like pity in her eyes. "Then I'd say you're either very brave or very stupid. And I'd recommend you write a will before you start asking questions." She moved away to serve another customer, and I sat there drinking my coffee and thinking. This wasn't paranoia or conspiracy theory. This was a small-town waitress giving me the same warning I'd gotten from my lieutenant and from Ellis. Stay away. Don't ask questions. Don't investigate. Which meant there really was something happening on Highway 46. Something big enough and powerful enough to intimidate an entire community into silence. I finished my coffee, left a generous tip, and walked out to my cruiser. As I was getting in, an old man sitting on a bench outside the general store called out to me. "You asking about the highway?" I walked over. He was maybe 75, wearing overalls and a John Deere cap, face tanned and creased like old leather. "You heard that? Small town. People talk." He gestured to the space next to him on the bench. "Sit for a minute." I sat. He was quiet for a while, watching a few cars drift past on the main street, then said, "I've lived here 60 years, watched this town grow, then watched it shrink, watched people come and go. But Highway 46, he shook his head. That road's been trouble since the day they built it. What do you mean? They drilled that tunnel in '69. I was working construction then, though not on that project. But I knew guys who were, and they said things got weird during the drilling. Equipment malfunctions. Strange sounds coming from deep in the rock. 3 different drill operators quit, said they weren't going back in there. Why? They wouldn't say, or couldn't. I think they signed something, some kind of agreement. But one of them, a guy named Ray Porter, he got drunk one night and told me they'd hit something. Not rock, not water. Something else. Something that shouldn't have been there. My skin prickled. What was it? He wouldn't tell me, said he couldn't. But he said when they hit it, there was a sound like metal on metal, and a smell like chemicals or something burning. They reported it, and engineers came out. State engineers, federal engineers, guys in suits who looked at the site and talked in whispers. Then they shut down the drilling for 3 weeks. When it started up again, different crew, different equipment, and nobody would talk about what they'd found. Do you know what happened to this Ray Porter? Died. Cancer, maybe 15 years ago. A lot of those guys died young. More than you'd expect for construction workers. He looked at me. You seem like a decent fellow. So, I'm going to tell you what I told that other trooper, the one who disappeared. Patterson. That's him, nice young man. Determined. Too determined. He adjusted his cap. Whatever's on Highway 46, it's been there longer than the road. The road just gave them access to it. And the people who built it, the people who run it now, they don't want anyone knowing about it. So you got 2 choices. You can walk away, keep your job, maybe keep your life, or you can dig deeper and end up like Patterson. What happened to Patterson? Don't know. But I saw his car that day before they towed it. I was driving past and saw all the cruisers and the commotion. Pulled over to see what was happening. His car was sitting there at the barrier, engine running, everything you heard. But there was something else. Something they didn't put in any report. What? Water. The driver's seat was soaking wet, like someone had dumped a bucket of water on it. And there were wet footprints leading from the car toward the tunnel. Barefoot prints. Going in but not coming out. I felt my chest tighten. Did you tell anyone? Told my wife, told the sheriff. He told me to keep my mouth shut if I knew what was good for me. The old man stood up slowly, joints creaking. I've said my piece. What you do with it is up to you. But remember, every man who's gone looking for answers on Highway 46 has ended up dead, or disappeared, or wished they were dead. You sure you want to be next? He walked away, leaving me sitting on that bench, staring at the quiet street and thinking about wet footprints and a missing trooper. I should have walked away. Should have gotten back in my cruiser and gone back to patrolling traffic violations and property disputes. Should have forgotten about Highway 46. But I couldn't, because now I had names. Ray Porter, Derek Patterson, people who'd found something and paid for it, and I needed to know what they'd found. That night, I made a decision. I was going to find out what was on that state-owned property near Highway 46. See what they were hiding in those 300 acres of forest. I waited until my shift ended at 11 o'clock p.m., then changed into civilian clothes, jeans, dark jacket, hiking boots. I took my personal vehicle instead of the cruiser, a beat-up Ford pickup that wouldn't attract attention. And I brought supplies. Flashlight, camera, binoculars, a handheld GPS unit. The fence line for the state property started about 2 miles from the Highway 46 barriers. I found it by using the property records and the GPS, driving down dark county roads until I spotted the chain link fence gleaming in my headlights. I parked on a side road and approached on foot. The fence was 10 feet tall, topped with 3 strands of barbed wire, and mounted with signs every 50 yards. No trespassing. State property. Violators will be prosecuted. I walked along the fence line, staying in the shadows, looking for a weak spot. After about a quarter mile, I found it. A section where the fence had been damaged, possibly by a falling tree. The chain link had torn and pulled away from the posts, creating a gap I could squeeze through if I was careful. I checked my surroundings, listening. The forest was quiet except for night sounds. Crickets, the distant hoot of an owl. No vehicles, no lights, no indication anyone was nearby. I slipped through the gap and into the property. The forest was thick, the undergrowth heavy. I moved slowly, using my flashlight sparingly, trying to stay oriented using the GPS. According to the satellite images, the cleared area was about a mile northeast of my position. It took me almost an hour of careful hiking to reach it. The trees thinned gradually, and then I was at the edge of a large clearing, maybe 10 acres of open ground. And in the clearing was a building. It was low and wide, maybe the size of a small warehouse, built from concrete and steel. Brutalist architecture, functional and ugly. No windows that I could see from my position. Just blank walls and a single metal door on the near side. Floodlights on poles illuminated the perimeter, casting harsh white light across the clearing. There was a loading dock on the far side, big enough for trucks to back up to, and parked near it were 2 vehicles, a dark SUV and a white van, both with government plates. I crouched in the trees at the edge of the clearing, raised my binoculars, and studied the building. Security cameras were mounted on poles around the perimeter, their red indicator lights blinking. The cameras were pointed outward, watching the forest, the fence line, watching for people like me. I lowered the binoculars and pulled out my camera, setting it to night mode. Started taking photos. The building, the vehicles, the cameras, anything that might be useful later. As I was photographing the loading dock, I heard something that made me freeze. Voices, coming from the far side of the building. I stayed low, barely breathing, and watched as 2 figures came around the corner. They were wearing what looked like hazmat suits, full-body coveralls, hoods, gloves, respirators. One of them was carrying a clipboard. They walked to the loading dock and stood there talking, their voices too quiet and distorted by the respirators for me to make out words. After a few minutes, they went back inside through a door I couldn't see from my position. Hazmat suits. That meant contamination. Chemical, biological, radiological. Something dangerous enough to require protective equipment. What the hell were they doing out here? I stayed in position for another 30 minutes, taking photos, watching. Nothing else happened. No more people emerged. No vehicles arrived or departed. Finally, I decided I'd pushed my luck far enough. I backed away from the clearing, keeping low, and made my way back through the forest to the fence. I was almost to the gap when I heard it. A sound behind me. Footsteps, moving through the underbrush. I froze, listening. The footsteps stopped. I started moving again, faster now. The footsteps resumed, matching my pace. Someone was following me. I abandoned stealth and ran, crashing through the undergrowth, branches whipping at my face. Behind me, the footsteps became running footsteps, gaining on me. I reached the gap in the fence and dove through, my jacket catching on the torn chain link. I yanked it free and kept running, back toward my truck. The footsteps stopped at the fence. I looked back and saw a figure standing there, silhouetted against the floodlights from the distant building. Too far away to make out details, but I could see they were wearing one of those hazmat suits. They just stood there watching me, not pursuing, not calling out, just watching. I got to my truck, jumped in, and drove away, my hand shaking on the wheel. I'd been seen. Whoever they were, they knew someone had been on the property. They might even have photos of me from those security cameras. I drove straight home and sat in my apartment, trying to calm down, trying to think. I had evidence now. Photos of the facility. Confirmation that there was active work happening on that property. Hazmat suits, which meant dangerous materials. But I also had a problem. I'd been trespassing on state property. If they wanted to, they could have me arrested, get me fired, end my career. Unless I made sure the information got out first. Made sure enough people knew what I'd found that they couldn't just bury it. I needed help. I needed someone outside the system, someone who could investigate without being silenced. I spent the next hour searching online for investigative journalists in the region. Found a reporter for a regional newspaper called the Northeast Standard, a woman named Sarah Wickham. Her bio said she'd worked as an investigative journalist for 15 years, written exposés on government corruption, environmental violations, corporate malfeasance. She seemed like someone who wouldn't be easily intimidated. I sent her an email from a throwaway account, brief and vague. I'm a state trooper. I have information about illegal activity at a state-owned facility in District 9. Need to meet in person. Urgent. Can you help? Then I waited, checking my email obsessively, unable to sleep. 2 hours later, just after 3:00 a.m., I got a response. Meet me at Marge's Place Diner in Ridgeway. 2:00 a.m. today. Come alone. Don't wear your uniform. S.W. I managed to get a couple hours of sleep, then called in sick for my shift. I'd never done that before. In 6 years, I'd taken maybe 3 sick days total. But I needed this meeting more than I needed to patrol empty roads. I drove to Ridgeway and arrived at the diner early, around 1:30 p.m. Took a booth in the back where I could see the door, ordered coffee, and waited. Sarah Wickham showed up right at 2 p.m. I recognized her from her photo on the newspaper's website. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, sharp eyes that took in everything as she scanned the diner. She spotted me immediately. I was the only person sitting alone in a back booth, and walked over. Trooper Cregan? Just Jonas today. Thanks for meeting me. She slid into the booth across from me, setting down a notebook and a digital recorder. Your email was intriguing. What have you got? I told her everything. The closed highway, the tunnel, the mysterious SUV, the state-owned property with the concrete building, the hazmat suits, the budget allocations, the disappearance of Trooper Patterson. She listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes, her expression serious and focused. When I finished, she sat back and studied me. You know this sounds insane, right? I know, but I have evidence. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken. The building, the vehicles, the hazmat-suited figures. She studied each image carefully, zooming in on details. These don't prove illegal activity. They just show a state-owned facility with people working there. People in hazmat suits, at a location that's supposed to be empty, with a budget of nearly $500,000 a year for a closed highway. It's suspicious, but it's not proof of anything criminal. She handed my phone back. What exactly do you think is happening there? I don't know, but I think it's connected to the tunnel under Highway 46. I think there's something underground, something they've been hiding since at least 2017, maybe longer. Based on what? I told her about the old man's story, about the drilling crew finding something in 1969, about the wet footprints at Patterson's abandoned cruiser. She was quiet for a moment, tapping her pen against her notebook. Okay, I'll be honest with you, this is thin. It's interesting, it's suspicious, but it's thin. Without more concrete evidence, without documentation, or whistleblowers, or hard proof of wrongdoing, I can't publish this. My editor would kill me. What if I got you more? What if I could prove there's something under that tunnel? How would you do that? I could go in at night, document whatever's down there. She shook her head. That's trespassing. Anything you found would be inadmissible and you'd lose your job. Plus, you'd probably get arrested. I'm going to lose my job anyway if I keep pushing this. They'll transfer me or fire me or make my life hell until I quit. I leaned forward. Look, I know this is dangerous, but something's happening on Highway 46. Something bad enough that a trooper disappeared and the department covered it up. Something bad enough that an entire town is too scared to talk about it. Don't you want to know what it is? She studied me for a long moment. You're putting a lot on the line for this. I know. Why? Why not just walk away? Keep your job, keep your pension, live your life. Because that's not why I became a trooper. I met her eyes. I became a trooper because I wanted to help people, protect people. And if there's something happening that needs to be stopped, I can't just ignore it because it's inconvenient or dangerous. That's not who I am. She smiled slightly. You're either very noble or very stupid. Probably stupid. Okay. She picked up her recorder and notebook. Here's what I'll do. I'll start digging on my end. Public records, FOIA requests. See if I can find any documentation about that facility or the tunnel or what happened in 2017. You keep gathering information, but be careful. Don't do anything illegal that could compromise the story. And if you find something concrete, documentation, photos of actual illegal activity, a whistleblower willing to talk, you call me immediately. And if I don't find anything concrete, then we're back to square one. Interesting story, no proof. She stood up. But Jonas, if what you're saying is true, if there really is something being covered up, the people behind it aren't going to let you expose it without a fight. Watch your back. She left, and I sat there alone in the booth, feeling both encouraged and terrified. I was committed now. There was no turning back. That night, I returned to my apartment and found something that made my skin crawl. A note. Slipped under my door while I'd been at the diner. It was handwritten on plain white paper, the letters neat and precise. Trooper Cregan, you are being watched. Stop investigating Highway 46, or there will be consequences. This is your only warning. No signature. No indication of who'd written it. I stood there holding the note, my hands shaking. They knew who I was. They knew where I lived, and they were threatening me. I should have been scared, and I was, but I was also angry. Because now I knew for sure there was something worth hiding on Highway 46. Something big enough and important enough that they were willing to threaten a state trooper to protect it. And I was going to find out what it was, even if it killed me. The next morning, I did something I probably should have done earlier. I went to see Maeve Stroud, the warden for the state forest that bordered Highway 46. Maeve was a legend in District 9, a no-nonsense woman in her late 50s who'd been managing that territory for over 20 years. She knew every trail, every road, every corner of that forest. If anyone knew what was happening in those woods, it would be her. I found her at the Forest Service office, a small building on the edge of the preserve. She was in her uniform, forest green with patches on the sleeves, reviewing a map on her desk when I knocked on the doorframe. Warden Stroud, I'm Trooper Cregan. Can I talk to you for a minute? She looked up, her eyes sharp and assessing. You're new. District 9, right? Yes, ma'am. Just transferred in a few weeks ago. Have a seat. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. What can I do for you, Trooper? I sat down, choosing my words carefully. I need to ask you about the area around Highway 46. Specifically, the land the state purchased in 2015. Her expression shifted slightly, a hardening around the eyes, a tightening of her jaw. That's not Forest Service land. That's state property under a different jurisdiction. But you patrol the area around it, right? The forest that borders that property? Sometimes. Why? I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken of the facility. Because I think there's something happening on that property. Something that might be illegal. She studied the photos for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she handed my phone back and leaned back in her chair. Where did you take these? I was hiking in the state forest near Highway 46, came across the property line and saw the building. You were hiking in uniform? No, ma'am, off duty. She nodded slowly, and I could see her making calculations, deciding how much to tell me. Trooper, I'm going to tell you something off the record. And you can't repeat it, can't quote me, can't use it in any official capacity. Understood? Understood. I've been warden here for 23 years, and for the past 8 years since Highway 46 was closed, I've seen things I can't explain. She pulled a file from her desk drawer and opened it. I keep my own records. Personal records, not official ones, because the official ones keep disappearing. She showed me the file. It was full of handwritten notes, dates, observations. Since 2017, I've logged over 40 incidents of unusual activity in the forest near Highway 46. Vehicles at night where there shouldn't be vehicles. Lights in areas with no roads or trails. And people, she paused, choosing her words carefully. People who don't belong out there. What do you mean? I mean people who look lost, disoriented, confused. I've found them wandering in the forest, sometimes miles from any road or trail, wearing street clothes, no hiking gear, no supplies. When I approach them and ask how they got there, they don't know. They don't even know where they are. Some of them can't remember their own names. My chest tightened. What do you do with them? I call it in to the state police every time, and every time someone comes and picks them up, usually within an hour. They're taken away, and I never hear about them again. I've tried to follow up, tried to find out who these people were and what happened to them, but every inquiry gets stonewalled. Have you filed reports? Of course I have. Detailed reports. Every incident with dates and descriptions and GPS coordinates. She tapped the file. And every single report gets kicked back with the same response. Handled by state authorities. No further action required. No follow-up, no explanation, no investigation. That's not right. I know it's not right. But I also know what happens to people who push too hard. She closed the file and put it back in her drawer. I'm 2 years from retirement, Trooper. I've got a pension and a mortgage and a life I want to live after I hang up this uniform. So I do my job, I file my reports, and I let the state handle whatever they're handling. But you're telling me now, because you're the first person who's had the guts to investigate in years. That other trooper, Patterson, he was asking the same questions, making the same connections, and then he disappeared. She looked at me. I liked Patterson. He was a good man, and I think about him every time I see something strange in those woods. Every time I find another confused person wandering around with no memory of how they got there. And I wonder if he's out there somewhere like them. Do you think he's alive? I don't know. But I know his car was found at Highway 46, with water all over the driver's seat. And I know that 2 days before he disappeared, he came to see me. Asked me the same things you're asking now. Wanted to know about the state property, about the facility, about what I'd seen. She pulled out another file, this one much thicker. I gave him copies of my records, all of them, every incident, every strange occurrence, and 48 hours later, he was gone. She handed me the file. I'm giving you the same thing I gave him, because maybe you'll succeed where he failed, or maybe you'll end up just like him. Either way, someone needs to know what's happening out there. I took the file, feeling its weight. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, just promise me something. What? Promise me you'll be careful. Whatever's on Highway 46, whatever's in those woods, it's dangerous. And the people protecting it don't care about due process or the law. They care about keeping it secret. She stood up, walked to her window, looked out at the forest. I've seen things in those woods, Trooper. Things I can't explain and don't want to explain. Lights that move wrong. Sounds that don't make sense. And once, about 3 years ago, I saw something that still gives me nightmares. What did you see? She was quiet for a long moment. I was doing a night patrol near the Highway 46 property line. About 2 o'clock a.m., I saw lights through the trees, so I went to investigate. Found a group of people, maybe 8 or 10 of them, standing in a clearing. They were all wearing white clothes, all barefoot, even though it was October and freezing. They were standing in a circle around something I couldn't see from my position. What were they doing? Just standing there, not moving, not talking, like statues. I called out to them, identified myself as a warden. They didn't respond, so I got closer, and that's when I saw what was in the center of the circle. Her voice dropped. It was a hole, like a well or a shaft, maybe 3 feet across, and there was light coming from it, not normal light. It was blue, bright blue, pulsing like a heartbeat. My skin prickled. What did you do? I got the hell out of there. Ran back to my truck and drove away. And I've never been back to that part of the forest at night. Never. She turned to face me. That's what you're dealing with, Trooper. That's what's happening in those woods. And if you're smart, you'll walk away right now and never think about it again. I can't do that. Then God help you. She sat back down at her desk, signaling the conversation was over. Now get out of my office, and if anyone asks, we never talked. I left with the file under my arm, my mind racing. Confused people in the woods. Lights coming from underground. A circle of people in white standing around a glowing hole. What the hell was happening on Highway 46? I spent the rest of the day in my apartment, going through Maeve's records. They were meticulous. Dates, times, locations, detailed descriptions of every incident, and the pattern was clear. The activity had started immediately after Highway 46 closed in 2017. Before that, Maeve's records showed normal Forest Service operations, maintenance, fire prevention, wildlife management. Nothing unusual, but after 2017, the incidents began. First, just a few per year. Then, more and more, until by 2023, she was logging something unusual almost every week. People found in the woods, vehicles where they shouldn't be, lights, sounds, and always they were near the Highway 46 property line. I cross-referenced her notes with missing person reports in the region. Found something that made my blood run cold. Over the past 8 years, 17 people had been reported missing in the counties surrounding Highway 46. 17 people who'd vanished without a trace, with no evidence of foul play, no bodies ever found. And at least 6 of them had last been seen on Route 211, the road that led to Highway 46. 6 people, probably more if you counted the ones who'd never been reported missing. Homeless people, undocumented immigrants, people on the margins who society had forgotten about. That's what Eldon Rowe had said. People who won't be missed. I called Sarah Wickham and told her what I'd found. She agreed to meet me again the next day. But that night, everything changed. I was asleep, a rare, deep sleep after days of insomnia, when my phone rang. I grabbed it, groggy, and saw Lieutenant Haskell's name on the screen. "Cregan, where the hell are you?" His voice was sharp, urgent. I sat up, checking the clock. 3:47 a.m. "I'm at home, sir. What's going on?" "Highway 46. There's been an incident. I need you at the scene right now." "What kind of incident?" "Just get there. And Cregan, bring your report notebook. This is going to be complicated." He hung up before I could ask anything else. I got dressed, threw on my uniform, and drove to Highway 46, my mind racing. An incident. At 3:47 in the morning, on a supposedly closed highway. When I arrived, the area was lit up like daytime. State police cruisers, ambulances, fire trucks, and what looked like federal vehicles, dark SUVs with government plates. The barriers had been pushed completely aside, and there were floodlights set up all along the road leading to the tunnel. I parked and got out, immediately hit by the smell. Chemical, acrid, like burning plastic mixed with something organic and rotten. A trooper I didn't recognize stopped me. "This area is restricted. I'm Trooper Cregan. Lieutenant Haskell called me." He checked his clipboard, then nodded. "You're cleared, but stay with the designated personnel and don't touch anything." I walked toward the tunnel, and that's when I saw them. Bodies. At least a dozen of them. Lying on the road just outside the tunnel entrance in neat rows, like they'd been arranged. They weren't moving. My stomach dropped. "What happened?" Haskell appeared at my elbow, his face grim. "We don't know yet. They were found this morning by a maintenance crew doing a routine check. No identification on any of them. No apparent cause of death. Were they killed? We don't know. The medical examiner is on the way, but Cregan," he gestured toward the bodies. "Come look at this." I followed him closer. The bodies were all adults, ranging from maybe 20 to 60 years old. Mixed genders, different races. But they all had something in common. They were soaking wet. Their clothes, their hair, their skin, everything was drenched, water pooling around them on the pavement. "It hasn't rained in 5 days," Haskell said quietly. "And there's no water source anywhere near here. So where did this water come from?" I crouched down next to one of the bodies. A woman, maybe 30, wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Her skin was pale, almost gray. Her eyes were closed. She looked peaceful, like she was sleeping. But her clothes were sodden, water still dripping from them. And when I touched her arm, I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help myself. Her skin was ice cold. Not just dead person cold, freezing cold, like she'd been in a refrigerator. "Don't touch them," a new voice said sharply. I stood up and turned. A man in a dark suit was approaching, federal ID hanging from his neck. He was maybe 40, with short hair and the kind of bland, forgettable face that probably served him well in his line of work. This is a federal crime scene now. State police are to observe only, no contamination of evidence. Haskell's jaw tightened. This is our jurisdiction, not anymore. As of 4 o'clock a.m., this incident falls under federal authority. Department of Homeland Security. The Fed looked at me. "You're Cregan?" "Yes." "I'm Agent Morrison. I need to speak with you, privately." He walked away from the scene, and after a glance at Haskell, who looked angry but resigned, I followed. Morrison led me to one of the SUVs, far enough from the other personnel that we wouldn't be overheard. "Trooper Cregan, I'm going to be direct with you. You've been investigating Highway 46, asking questions, trespassing on state property, taking photographs." My blood ran cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence. We have you on security footage at the facility. We've monitored your communications with the journalist. We know everything you've been doing. He pulled out a tablet and showed me a photo. Me, standing at the edge of the clearing, holding my camera. This is you, isn't it? There was no point in denying it. Yes. Then I need you to understand something. What you're investigating is classified, national security level. And you're this close, he held up his thumb and forefinger nearly touching, to being arrested for espionage. Espionage? I'm a state trooper You're a state trooper who's interfered with a federal operation, trespassed on restricted property, and compromised years of work. He put away the tablet. But I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here to give you a choice. What choice? Choice 1. You delete every photo you've taken. You stop investigating. You forget Highway 46 exists. You tell the journalist you were mistaken, that there's nothing there, and you keep your job and your freedom. And choice 2? Choice 2. We arrest you for trespassing and unauthorized photography of a classified facility. You lose your job, your pension, and you spend the next 5 years in federal prison. Your choice. I looked past him at the bodies lying on the pavement, at the other troopers and federal agents moving around them, taking photos, collecting evidence. What about them, those people? Those people are part of an ongoing investigation. That's all you need to know. They're dead. 12 people are dead on a supposedly closed highway. And you're telling me to just forget about it? I'm telling you that this is beyond your pay grade and beyond your authority. There are things happening here that you don't understand and can't be allowed to interfere with. His voice softened slightly. Trooper, I get it. You're a good cop. You want to help people. But sometimes the best way to help is to step back and let the people with the full picture handle things. And you have the full picture? Yes. Then tell me, what's under that tunnel? What killed those people? What are you hiding? He was quiet for a long moment, then, I can't tell you that. And if you're smart, you won't want to know. Because once you know, you can't unknow it. And it'll haunt you for the rest of your life. There was something in his voice, not quite fear, but close. Like he was speaking from experience. I need an answer, he said. Right now. Delete the photos and walk away, or face the consequences. What's it going to be? I thought about Patterson, about the missing people, about everything I'd learned, and I thought about my career, my freedom, my life. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery. Morrison watched as I selected the photos of the facility and hit delete. All of them, he said. I deleted every photo I'd taken related to Highway 46. The facility, the tunnel, the vehicles, all of it. Good choice. Morrison pulled out a business card and handed it to me. If you remember anything else, if you're contacted by the journalist again, you call me immediately, understood? Understood. Now go home. Take the next few days off, and when you come back to work, you're going to be reassigned. Your lieutenant will have the details. He walked away, back toward the federal vehicles, leaving me standing there feeling hollow and defeated. I got back in my cruiser and drove away from Highway 46, watching the scene shrink in my rearview mirror. Flashing lights, body bags being loaded into vehicles, federal agents taking over what should have been a state police investigation. I'd lost. They'd beaten me, and 12 people were dead, and nobody was going to explain why or how or what had happened to them. When I got home, I sat in my apartment and stared at my phone for a long time. Then I called Sarah Wickham. Jonas, I heard about Highway 46. Are you okay? I need to tell you something. I'm done investigating. There's nothing there. I was wrong. Silence on the other end. Then, They got to you. Sarah, what did they threaten you with? Arrest? Your job? I'm sorry, I can't help you anymore. Jonas, listen to me. If you stop now, those 12 people died for nothing. We're so close. We're not close to anything. There's nothing to find. I made a mistake. I saw things that weren't there, and I'm done. I felt sick saying it. Please don't call me again. I hung up before she could respond. Then I sat there in the dark, hating myself, knowing I'd made the only choice I could make, but also knowing it was the wrong choice. Knowing that those 12 bodies wouldn't be the last. And knowing that I'd failed to stop whatever was happening on Highway 46. They transferred me 3 days later. Lieutenant Haskell called me into his office and handed me a folder without ceremony. Effective immediately, you're being reassigned to desk duty in the Capitol. Administrative support, traffic analysis, report review. He wouldn't meet my eyes. It's not a punishment, it's a lateral move. We both knew it was a punishment. Desk duty was where they sent cops who'd screwed up too badly to fire, but too mildly to prosecute. It was purgatory. How long? I asked. Indefinitely, until you're told otherwise. He finally looked at me. Cregan, I tried to warn you. I tried to protect you. You should have listened. What about the 12 people who died on Highway 46? What about Patterson? What about all the others? That's not your concern anymore. It should be someone's concern. And it is. Just not yours. He stood up, walked to his window. You want to know the truth? You want to know why I told you to stay away from Highway 46? Yes? Because 15 years ago, I made the same mistake you did. I investigated. I asked questions. I went to that tunnel at night and I saw... He trailed off, his reflection in the window looking old and tired. I saw things I can't explain. Things that shouldn't exist. And when I reported it, when I tried to do something about it, I was given a choice. Shut up and keep my job or keep talking and lose everything. So you shut up. I shut up, and I've regretted it every day since. He turned to face me. But I also stayed employed. I kept my pension. I didn't end up in prison or disappeared or dead. And maybe that makes me a coward. But it also means I get to go home to my wife every night. It means I get to retire in 2 years and buy that cabin in Montana and try to forget about all of this. What about your conscience? He smiled bitterly. My conscience is a small price to pay for my life, Trooper. You'll understand that eventually. I left his office with the transfer papers and went home to pack. 2 days later, I reported to my new assignment in the Capitol. A gray office building full of gray cubicles where I'd spend the next however many years reviewing traffic reports and filing paperwork. It was soul-crushing and mind-numbing and utterly safe. I hated every second of it. But I went through the motions, showed up at 8 o'clock a.m., sat at my desk, reviewed my reports, went home at 5 o'clock p.m., like a good little cog in the machine. And every night I thought about Highway 46. Sarah Wickham's article came out 3 weeks after my transfer. It ran in the Northeast Standard under the headline, Questions Surround Mysterious Deaths on Closed Highway 46. It was good work. She'd done her research, gathered what public records existed, interviewed people in Ridgeway who were willing to talk. She laid out the timeline of the closure, the suspicious budget allocations, the pattern of missing persons, the 12 bodies found at the tunnel. But she didn't have proof of anything illegal. Just questions. Just suspicions. And without that proof, without hard evidence or whistleblowers or documentation, the article couldn't do more than hint at conspiracy. The story got picked up by a few other regional papers. It made some noise on social media for a day or two. There were calls for an investigation, demands for transparency. And then nothing happened. No official response from the state. no federal investigation, no explanations or accountability. The bodies were quietly buried. The families, for the ones who had families, were told it was an accident, a tragedy, but an accident nonetheless. And the media moved on to the next story. Highway 46 remained closed, barricaded, forgotten. Except by me, I couldn't forget, couldn't let it go. Every night I'd lie in bed thinking about those wet bodies, about Patterson's abandoned car, about the people in white standing around a glowing hole in the forest, about what Morrison had said. Once you know, you can't unknow it, and it'll haunt you for the rest of your life. He'd been right about that. 3 months after my transfer, I started getting the calls, always around 3 o'clock a.m., always from unknown numbers. I'd answer, and there'd be nothing but static, and through the static, faintly, I'd hear my own voice. Unit 47, this is Trooper Cregan, requesting backup. It was the transmission I'd made that first day at Highway 46, when I'd reported the moved barriers. Someone had recorded it and was playing it back to me. At first, I thought it was harassment. Some Fed trying to mess with my head, remind me to keep quiet. But after a few weeks, I started to think it was something else. Something worse. A warning or an invitation. 4 months in, I started having the dreams. Always the same dream. I'm walking through the tunnel on Highway 46. The red lights are on, casting everything in a bloody glow. I can hear water dripping somewhere ahead, and my footsteps echo off the concrete. I walk for what feels like hours, but the tunnel never ends. It just keeps going, deeper and deeper, the temperature dropping, my breath fogging in the air. And then I see them. The people in white, standing in the darkness ahead, forming 2 lines like they're creating a path for me. Their faces are blank, expressionless, wet. I try to turn back, but I can't. My legs keep moving forward, carrying me between the lines of silent figures towards something at the end of the tunnel. A light, blue light, pulsing like a heartbeat. And as I get closer, I start to understand. I start to remember things I shouldn't know. Things about the tunnel, about what was found during the drilling in 1969, about what's been there underneath for much longer than any highway. But I always wake up before I reach the light. Wake up gasping, covered in sweat, my sheets soaked like I've been underwater. And every time I wake up, I find my clothes wet, my hair damp, like I've actually been there. 5 months after my transfer, I got a visitor. I was at my apartment on a Saturday afternoon, trying to distract myself with mindless TV, when someone knocked on my door. Through the peephole, I saw Eldon Rowe. I opened the door. "Mr. Rowe, what are you doing here?" He looked worse than when I'd seen him last. Thinner, older, scared. "They're shutting it down," he said without preamble. "The operation at Highway 46. There was an incident, something went wrong, and now they're cleaning house." "What do you mean, cleaning house?" "I mean, anyone who knows too much is being dealt with. 2 other consultants have disappeared in the last month. I'm probably next." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I'm leaving, tonight. Going somewhere they can't find me. But before I go, I wanted to give you this." He handed me the envelope. "What is it?" "Documentation. Everything I know about Highway 46, what's down there, what they're doing, where the people come from. All of it." He backed toward the door. "I kept copies. Insurance. But if something happens to me, I want someone else to know the truth. Maybe you can't do anything with it. Maybe it's too dangerous. But at least someone will know. Eldon, don't contact me. Don't try to find me. If you use what's in that envelope, wait until I'm long gone, at least 6 months. Give me time to disappear." He paused in the doorway. "And Trooper, Whatever you do, don't go back to Highway 46. Don't go into that tunnel, because once you go in, you don't come out. Not as yourself. He left, and I stood there holding the envelope, feeling its weight. I should have burned it. Should have thrown it away unopened. Should have forgotten about Eldon and Highway 46 and all of it. But I didn't. I opened it. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. The truth about Highway 46. Use it carefully. Or don't use it at all. Either way, I'm sorry. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop and started reading. The files were extensive. Hundreds of pages of documents, photos, diagrams. Most of it was technical, geological surveys, construction reports, budget documents. But buried in the technical language was the story. In 1969, during the construction of Tunnel 46A, the drilling crew hit something. Not rock, not water, a cavity, an underground chamber that shouldn't have existed. The chamber was old, ancient, possibly prehistoric. And it contained something. The documents didn't say what exactly. They used vague terms like biological anomaly and unidentified organic material and requires further study. But whatever it was alive, or had been alive, or existed in some state between living and dead. The state government, in cooperation with federal agencies, decided to study it. They built a facility, the one I'd photographed, to access the chamber through vertical shafts. They brought in scientists, researchers, specialists in fields I'd never heard of, and they started experimenting. At first, it was just observation, documentation, analysis. But over time, the experiments became more invasive, more aggressive. They took samples. They tried to communicate with it. They exposed it to different stimuli, different conditions, and it responded. The documents described unexpected behavioral changes and anomalous effects on personnel, and recommendation for increased security protocols. In 2017, something went wrong. There was an incident that required immediate shutdown of the facility and closure of Highway 46. The details were redacted, but the outcome was clear. Several people died. More were affected. The facility was sealed, or supposedly sealed. Because according to Eldon's notes, the experiments didn't stop. They just went deeper. Literally. They built new access points, created new facilities further underground, and continued the work. And they needed test subjects. That's where the missing people came in. The homeless, the addicts, the undocumented. People who wouldn't be missed. They were taken to the facility, exposed to whatever was in that chamber, and observed. Some died, some changed, some disappeared completely. And some, like the 12 bodies found at the tunnel, escaped, or were released, or were sent out for reasons the documents didn't explain. I read through all of it, feeling sick, feeling angry, feeling helpless. This was bigger than I'd imagined, worse than I'd feared, and there was nothing I could do about it, because I had no proof beyond these documents which could be dismissed as forgeries. I had no witnesses beyond Eldon who'd fled. I had no authority to investigate and no resources to pursue it. I was just a disgraced trooper sitting in a cubicle, powerless to stop any of it. I should have given the files to Sarah. Let her take the risk, do the work, expose it all. But I remembered Morrison's threat. Remembered what had happened to Patterson and the others who'd pushed too hard. So I encrypted the files, hid them in multiple backups, and went back to my gray cubicle and my gray life. And every night the phone calls continued, the dreams got worse, and I felt myself changing, becoming obsessed, unable to focus on anything except Highway 46. 6 months after my transfer, I made a decision. I was going back. I didn't tell anyone, didn't make plans or preparations. I just got in my car one Friday night and drove to District 9. It was a 6-hour drive, and I spent it remembering. My first day in the district. My first sight of the tunnel. The wet bodies. Morrison's warning, all of it. I arrived at Highway 46 around 2 a.m. The barriers were still there, pushed aside as always. I drove past them onto the closed highway, my headlights cutting through the darkness. The tunnel loomed ahead, its mouth dark and waiting. I parked about 50 yards from the entrance and sat there for a moment. My hands on the wheel, my heart pounding. I could still turn back. Drive home. Forget all of this. But I knew I couldn't. I got out of the car and walked towards the tunnel. As I approached, the red lights inside flickered on, one by one, like they were activating in response to my presence. I stepped inside. The temperature dropped immediately. The air was damp, heavy with that chemical smell I remembered. And I could hear it now, that sound Maeve had mentioned. A low hum, rhythmic, almost like breathing. I walked deeper, following the red lights. My footsteps echoed off the concrete. The hum grew louder. Halfway through, I found it. A vent in the wall. The same one I'd noticed before. But it was open now, the grate removed, revealing the shaft leading down into darkness. And from the darkness came light. Blue light, pulsing. Just like in my dreams. I knew I shouldn't. Knew it was insane, knew that if I went down there I might not come back, but I also knew I needed to see it, needed to understand, needed to know what was at the heart of all this. I lowered myself into the shaft. There were metal rungs set into the concrete forming a ladder. I climbed down, 20 feet, 30 feet, deeper and deeper. The blue light grew brighter, the humming louder. At the bottom was a corridor, concrete walls, bare fluorescent lights, and that pervasive smell of chemicals and decay. I followed the corridor. It branched, twisted, led deeper into the earth. And everywhere I looked there were signs of activity. Fresh footprints in the dust. Recently used equipment. Doors with electronic locks. This place wasn't sealed. It was active, operational. After what felt like hours, but was probably 20 minutes, I found it. A large chamber, circular, maybe 50 feet across. And in the center was... I don't have words for what it was. It looked like water at first glance. A pool of water, perfectly still, reflecting the blue light that came from somewhere beneath its surface. But it wasn't water. It was too thick, too dark. And it moved wrong, rippling without any wind or disturbance, like it had its own heartbeat. Around the pool were monitoring stations. Computers, sensors, cameras, all recording, all observing. And standing around the pool, just like Maeve had described, were people in white. They didn't react to my presence, just stood there, hands at their sides, faces blank, staring at the pool. I counted 12 of them, the same number as the bodies found at the tunnel. One of them turned to look at me, and I recognized her. It was the woman I'd seen at the crime scene, the one whose arm I'd touched, the one who'd been soaking wet and ice cold. She was alive, or something like alive. Her lips moved, and I heard her voice, though it sounded like it was coming from far away. "Welcome home." And then I understood. This was where they came from. This was where they went. The pool, the chamber, whatever was down here, it was the source, the beginning and the end. Patterson was down here somewhere, and all the others. Changed. Transformed into something not quite human anymore, and I was about to join them. I turned to run, but the people in white moved to block the corridor. They didn't rush or attack. They just stood there, forming a wall between me and escape. I heard footsteps behind me, turned, and saw more of them emerging from other corridors. Dozens of them, all in white, all wet, all blank-faced. They surrounded me, forming a circle, just like Maeve had described. And then they started walking me toward the pool. I struggled, fought, screamed, but there were too many of them, and they were stronger than they looked. They brought me to the edge of the pool, and I saw my reflection in its dark surface. I saw myself, terrified, desperate, and then they pushed me in. The water, if it was water, was ice cold. So cold it burned. I sank immediately, unable to swim, unable to breathe. And in the darkness beneath the surface, I saw it. The thing that had been there before the tunnel, before the highway, before anything human. The thing that had been sleeping for who knows how long, until the drilling woke it up. It was vast, incomprehensible, beautiful and terrible, and it was hungry. I felt it reaching for me, pulling me deeper, and I knew I was going to die, or change, or become something else entirely. But then, I don't remember what happened next. One moment I was drowning in that pool, surrounded by darkness and blue light and that thing reaching for me. The next moment I was lying on the ground outside the tunnel, soaking wet, gasping for air, my lungs burning. It was dawn, the sun was rising, and my car was still where I'd parked it 6 hours earlier. I staggered to my feet, my clothes dripping, and looked back at the tunnel. The red lights were off. The entrance was dark and silent, like nothing had happened. I got in my car and drove away, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. When I got back to my apartment, I found that I'd been gone for 3 days, not 6 hours. My phone was full of missed calls from my supervisor asking where I was, why I hadn't shown up for work. I called in sick, said I'd had a mental health crisis. They put me on administrative leave pending a psychological evaluation. I failed the evaluation. Of course I did. How could I pass when I couldn't stop thinking about that pool, that thing, those people in white? They medically retired me, gave me a partial pension and a stern recommendation to seek therapy. I tried therapy, tried medication, tried everything, but nothing helped because the dreams didn't stop, the phone calls didn't stop. And every night, around 3 o'clock a.m., I'd wake up and find myself standing in my shower, fully dressed, water running over me. I'd look in the mirror and see my eyes. Too dark. Too empty. Just like the others. I'm changing, slowly but inevitably. And I know that eventually I'll go back to Highway 46, back to that tunnel, back to that pool. Because it's calling me, through the dreams, through the water, through whatever connection was formed when I went into that chamber. It's calling all of us, everyone who's been there, everyone who's seen it, everyone who's touched the water, and we can't resist. Not forever. Last week, I drove to District 9 again. I didn't plan to. I just woke up and found myself on the highway driving north with no memory of getting in the car. I stopped at a rest area and sat there for an hour, trying to fight it, trying to turn around and go home. But I could feel it pulling at me, like a hook in my chest, reeling me in. I called Sarah Wickham, told her everything, gave her access to Eldon's files, begged her to expose it, to stop it, to do something. She promised she would, promised she'd publish it all, consequences be damned. But I don't think it'll matter, because this thing, whatever it is, has been there longer than us, longer than the state, longer than the country, longer than civilization itself. And it's patient, it can wait, it can adapt, it can call. I'm at Highway 46 now, parked at the barriers. It's 2:47 a.m. In 13 minutes my phone will ring. Unknown number, static, my own voice asking for backup. And this time, I'm going to answer differently. I'm going to walk into that tunnel, climb down into that chamber, stand at the edge of that pool, and I'm going to let it take me. Because I can't fight it anymore. And maybe, if I go willingly, if I become one of them, I'll finally understand what this is all about. Or maybe I'll just disappear like Patterson and all the others. Either way, someone needs to know. Someone needs to remember. Highway 46 isn't closed because of a landslide. It's closed because something's down there, something old, something hungry, something that's been waiting. And it's not done yet. If you're reading this, stay away from Highway 46. Don't investigate it. Don't ask questions about it. Don't even drive near it. Because once it knows you're interested, once it calls to you, you can't resist.